Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is February 15th, 2024, and this is the regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. I would ask everyone to please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As I stated, this is the regularly scheduled February Board of Education meeting for the Horsehead Central School District. At this time, I will turn it over to the Board President, Mr. Warren.
Good evening. I need a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing individual personnel and/or student matters, employee discipline matter, and tenure reviews.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, we'll go to executive session, and we're planning on being back at 6 o'clock.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're the Board of Education is just returning from executive session. It's roughly, I don't have the time. 6:13. Apologize for a little bit of the tardiness. We had a couple of issues that we had to have a little longer discussion upon, as well as the board may return to executive session towards the end of the meeting. At this time, I'd like to turn over the opening of the Board of Education meeting, as we've already done the pledge, to our Board President, Mr. Warren.
Welcome to everyone tonight. Is this on? I don't think it is. Welcome. All right, welcome to everyone tonight. I don't know that I really need this, but. All right, our first action is to approve the minutes from the January 18th meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Curiosity, discussion, comments? Call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. All right, the next section of our meeting is the community questions and comments. I have a long prepared statement to read, but there is nobody speaking tonight, correct? So in general, I'll just say this: our community comment section is for us to hear from the public. We limit your comments to 3 minutes, and it's not designed to be an interaction. It's designed more to be information gathering, and then at some point into the future, we would get back to the individual that spoke. So, one last time, is there anybody that wants to speak? All right, so then we go to item number 4, our report from our student representative, Mr. Miller.
Hello. The senior class is hosting their final volunteer opportunity next week at the food bank. The senior class is also getting ready for their senior prom, Tangled in Our Memories, May 18th at the Hilltop. Elementary classes all around the district celebrated Valentine's Day by sharing cards with their classmates. Student Council hosted a very successful winter semi-formal dance, which included snow cones. The GRP is continuing rehearsals leading up to their production of SpongeBob the Musical, March 14th, 15th, and 16th. There are 34 students that are part of the cast and 40 students working behind the scenes. The middle school had their musical Moana Jr., which was a huge success. Interact is proud to announce their spring fundraiser for the International Rescue Committee, helping displaced persons around the world like Syria, Israel, and Ukraine. Their goal is $250. They will also resume their reading program with Center Street Elementary in the spring. Today we celebrate National SRO Day, so we would like to thank them for keeping our schools a safe place. The Environmental Science Club started an after-school science club with some of the 4th graders at Center Street. The high school group meets with the Center Street students once a month to teach them about different science topics. This month's was about ecosystem. The freshman class is in the process of planning the powder puff volleyball with the sophomore class. This event will be hosted on March 8th at the middle school field house from 6 to 8. Today we hosted the YAC Summit, where Unified Sports and Special Olympics team are putting on leadership trainings for students from Horseheads, Corn and Painted Post, Elmira, Ithaca, Lansing, Maine Endwell, Union Endicott, and Vestal school districts. The junior class is planning their prom Secret Garden, set to be held March 23rd at the Horseheads Elks. Gardner Road students made Valentine's cards for the Chemung County Sheriff's Office. Unified Bowling is in full swing with over 40 athletes from Horseheads School and Phoenix Academy participating. Senior night will be February 27th at Crystal Lanes. Last night we hosted the Girls Stack West Semifinal Championship, where both teams have won. The girls varsity basketball team earned the #1 seed in sectionals this season. Boys and girls bowling finished third at the Stack tournament. The boys wrestling team placed first at the sectional tournament, where 10 wrestlers will be entering states. And the girls JV Stack final is tonight at Horsehead Middle School. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And I want to say Mr. Miller is an excellent bowler. I went to one of the Unified bowling matches, and he was right out there.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to section 5. We have a presentation tonight from Dr. Douglas on the state of the schools.
If I can get my thing. Okay, I think I turned it off. Now I'll turn it on. Okay, somebody else? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Conklin. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Before I start the district update, I do have a couple things just to make some updates to the board. First of all, the apps process that we've been talking about over the past couple of months, I want to thank the nurse practitioner, Charles Detay, and they're updating to make sure that the will of the board at this point for the rest of this year has been updated, it's been shared, and it is all up on the website and on the forms, and as well as a very detailed process that everyone has to go through. That does not mean that this process is over. Roughly, the A&E committee is working on any considerations of the apps process going forward with primary care physicians. If they make that recommendation, and I've tried to give them the next 2 months, I believe, to work on that and develop what would our form going forward to present to the board. That it should come back somewhere around May or June, but I think we targeted May. So just so that you know, that's moving forward as well. I have every confidence in the A&E committee and the people leading that as they try to make sure that we always take care of everything, but we make sure that apps is for the exceptional athlete and that unique student. I currently think that in this season, because the process is underway, I think there are a couple that have to do some recertification in scores, because honestly, the district wasn't doing that before when we found out that that has to be done if they change an age or a grade level within a sport or a sport level, and they're still in middle school. So that is now fully enforced, and that has come as a surprise to some, but most of the kids, as long as they've already met the requirements, are already addressed and they don't have to retest, but we have to verify. So that's a safety protocol that's in the apps that was never followed. So now that is being implemented as well. So more to come on that probably around May, but at this point I believe we have roughly 8 students that have to go through the full process at this point. And where are we at in that process, Mr. Dutay?
We're good. I've turned in their parent packets. Permission forms have all been turned in, so now Kristen is setting up the dates and times and communicating when they will be meeting.
And just as an example, the forms, they helped make very clear everybody's intention?
Yep, if we give parents some additional options that were options before, but laid them out more clearly for parents to have a more informed decision.
Okay, and then really the selection is up to them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's what I just wanted to let the board know that that's there. I have a copy of it if you want to see it later as well, just as a hard copy. The second thing is 24-25 school calendar. We're hoping to have that for you at the next meeting. I know BOCES has, I think, approved their calendar at this point. We're just working on notifications and working through which options we're going to do. But I can tell you that next year, right now, the Easter break and that spring break time is the week of Good Friday, and I think it's roughly from April 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and Good Friday is on the 18th. Right now, currently, there is February break. It all depends what Albany does with holidays, if we have to revise that. So we're trying to wait a little bit, but we're looking at that, and we just wanted to get that out early. As the board knows, the region is going to go through a total eclipse on April 8th. And everyone is changing their school calendars all of a sudden. So we are hoping right after the break that as we talk with the other superintendents, we are not going to lose a school day over the total eclipse. But it is a very important educational opportunity, as well as it's an opportunity for something that only comes along once, or maybe, if you're lucky, twice in a lifetime, that we will be looking with our fellow superintendents about options for April 8th. Some of those are potentially a half a day for instruction, so that individuals can get out. The issue and the concern in the county is that the totality of the eclipse actually happens when people are on the road. There'd be a large amount they're worried about people traveling through the area, that they would like to decompress the roadways, interstates as much as possible. So they are reaching out to school districts for help. Everybody was a no at first. Now all of a sudden my colleagues to the west that are very close to it, and I think it's like 312 or something, but from about 1:30 to about 3:30, 4 o'clock, we will see something that's unprecedented. I mean, we may have to make sure if we have practices, I'm telling you, Jason, go late at night, even though we have lights. But it's something that after the break, you'll probably hear an announcement from the district in conjunction with what's happening in the summer. So I just wanted that out there. And now, ladies and gentlemen, because Anthony's done such a great job, I'm going to move on to the district update, because I don't have to say a lot of the great things happening in the district, because pretty much you're getting out there, and I do appreciate the board members that have gotten out and gotten to the event. So at this time, I will transition over there, and is the presentation up? We have 50 slides for you, everybody.
Don't look at me.
Tony was gonna hold the record.
I will beat Tony, I guarantee you.
We'll take that
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time of the year. This is some of the more challenging times of the year, because as we do a district update, we're sort of updating over the past year and up until now. But as you can see, the district update starting for February 15th, 2024. We might as well start out with a lot of things. Even Anthony said, see that Moana's right there? We have kids in the elementary schools. We have students getting their awards. We've got cooperative grouping, learning, and I've got to make sure I can see everything. Yes?
It's kind of hard to, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
You are?
Is the mic
The mic
on? I don't know.
Oh.
Well, thank you for letting
I thought you were still using the one around your neck.
Oh, can I?
You can use which one you want.
I'd rather use that one.
Okay.
There. And is that a little better?
That is better, yeah.
Good. A lot of things that we do in the district are to highlight activities, opportunities for students, and that's been an initiative of the board. We have our construction picture lower corner, where the students are out and about and seeing what's happening as they transfer around the building, and they intermix with our construction crews, our administration, our parents, and our administrators do a wonderful job of keeping everybody safe. In addition, we have athletic events, we have students that learn their socialization, and that we've truly transitioned out of the pandemic era, and we are way beyond post-pandemic with a lot of things that the students are doing. Our field band has a home show, and I'm happy to announce that our home show will not be on next year on Columbus Indigenous People Weekend. It is actually moving the week before, so athletics needs to adjust. So thank you very much, Mr. Day. But that's a big thing because honestly, it's hard to get people to come out when it's a long weekend for a band competition. So we are fortunate enough to have that opportunity. I want to thank our music department for making that happen as those realities. We always know that we have an outstanding transportation department as well as the drivers and monitors and individuals that make things happen across the 269 square mile district, and they do it quite regularly with very few issues, but when we do have an issue, they're professional and they try to make sure that, most importantly, students are safe and secure. Even when the superintendent misses a snow day call, or even when the snow day call misses the weather that's actually outside like we've had in the past couple of weeks. So, but we do want to thank them as well. Ladies and gentlemen, also, what happens is we have administrators that work individually. We have our SRO program that is I would believe, one of the best in the area because we have individuals that are in each building. This comes at significant cost, and no cost is not worth the safety of our children. So I want to thank, obviously, Mr. McGrain's up there, but we've got 7 officers and a sergeant to go around, and they are integrating with the kids. And no matter what, when you see these activities, you see choral and the play and the rehearsals at the high school. You see the Veterans Day and our community coming together, not only at Center Street, but across our district. You see the hard work of our staff every event, but in the lower corner, that's a lot of our new staff and our curriculum workings together. This is an entire effort to try to maintain the best of Horseheads, and that is because of the Board of Education, all these decisions over the several years that you have been together, as well as for the years to come for our new board members. But most importantly, Horsehead Central School is about educational opportunities. The educational opportunities we look at, I'd like to turn over to my assistant superintendent because he is the sort of right arm of the operations of the education and construction and curricular side, Mr. Tony Gill.
Thanks, Tom. So I've had the opportunity, or better yet, taken the opportunity to speak to you on the issues of the educational program in this district over the course of the last couple board meetings. So I'll briefly go over some of the highlights of things that we've shared in our sessions together. We really focus our work around this multi-tiered system of supports, looking at the whole child in all aspects, behavioral and academic and social emotional. So we want to continue unpacking those standards and developing those goals and working on essential questions with our teams and moving towards what are called performance tasks and cornerstone tasks. This is high-end learning, performance learning that we've talked about in previous board meetings. Here are the particular departments we have in the hopper right now. You can see we have plenty of things going on. You know, ELA and math have been 2 years in implementation. I think ELA is in 2 years, math is in its first year of full implementation. So a lot of great working, general music in a year of implementation. So they're giving the information, using the units that we've created with students, and then reflecting and revising through a process. As to not have anything static in the work that we do. Science, it's an important one. We have assessments and standards changes occurring in that 639, so a lot of work being done there, and the world language and the physical education with Charles on restless work, and with Tiffany, and then the special education with our Kelly and her crew stepping in to assist on integrating all that great work that's happening with those students with disabilities and making sure that they are getting the at grade level expectations that are occurring in the general ed. And most importantly, that last one, real focus in the last several years, and had the opportunity with the social emotional learning and the Character Strong program we've begun, and looking at how do we use tools to diagnose and screeners on the social emotional aspect of our work with students. What's next? Obviously, it's a continuation. We don't build binder trophies here. We do the work, we implement it, and we continue to revise. We want to widen that professional learning on UBD, the Understanding by Design. You know the science of reading, we're well ahead of that. The state is actually, as we'll hear from Katie in a bit, is putting aside money for everybody to get on board with the science of reading. I hope they can backdate our money and give us what we've been doing for the last couple of years. Our math models and instructional practices with Joe Kohler. We have on the hopper our geometry exams and standards, as well as chemistry and physics, and then we have some work to be done in integrating social studies into some of that ELA work and science. A real good look at the kits that we use and what does that look like for that FOSS implementation that we've adopted and had around for about 13, 14 years now in the district. So some serious looks at what that looks like, and this is made possible with some of the curriculum coordinators that we have and the work that we do through them. Also in the disciplinary work, we want to make sure we're looking at the tier 1, what it looks like in the classroom and what teachers are doing with students on a regular basis, those performance tests I alluded to earlier, and differentiation. Data is something that we talk about, but really to understand it is another story, and I know Joe's started that work, and we had a little presentation to the board some time ago that went through what our benchmarking is and what we're looking at as a system when it comes to assessments. Continue to look at those diagnostic screeners and progress monitoring tools for the social emotional, and obviously the continued work in that blueprint, curricular blueprint. Remember, the disciplinary means that academic realm, the academics that we do with our, that comes from the standards, the performance indicators, and the local coursework that we have created, especially at the high school. And then that's mixed with the transdisciplinary, those things that, especially at the portion of graduate work that we're doing, and how that transcends what we do in our classrooms through these standards and performance indicators. So that's also what's next in our curriculum disciplinary work is unpacking those 7 that have been created through an affinity process over quite some time. Wellness, independence, we're going to cheat, we're going to look, creativity, critical thinking, communication, citizenship, and collaboration. Those are the things that we want to see in our graduates, and where do they fit in our curriculum, and when they don't, how do we embed them in those curriculum maps being mentored forward. And then looking to that cornerstone assessments. I'm going to turn it over to Tom now to talk about technology.
Thank you, Tony. I don't know who was quicker, me or you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, our education is really our primary focus. And you saw all the curriculum work. The reason why we are pushing and pushing and pushing is because we started this prior to COVID. Now we're post-COVID, but more and more is coming out and having to be done. And it is the lifeblood work of our faculty, our staff, our administration. And you know what? We're one of the few that are using our own staff to make sure that this is what's best for Horseheads. And I want to thank everybody that's given their time on all of these committees, because it is not something that's just 1 or 2 meetings, is it, Tiffany? It is months, it is check-ins, it is after school, it is off work hours. These people are dedicated to make sure of trying to improve upon the state standards, but most importantly, so that we give a consistent, regular curriculum that is the same for all of our students. Not that we teach the same, but that every student is getting access to the same educational level and standards. So thank you, as well as all the teachers and staff that are out there, as well as the board members that have also participated. Ladies and gentlemen, educational opportunities, we've had a push over the past couple of years for one-to-one device initiatives and the continuation, and we're at that point that as we go through next year, we're pretty much fully one-to-one integrated. That's our goal, but it does come with costs. And as you know, I'm going to keep saying the cost word throughout this evening, because we have Promethean's laptop replacement cycles. We have the Smart School Bonds Act that we're finalizing, even though many schools across the state have not fully expended their money. We are about to fully expend ours, and that's from, I think, 2010 or 12 when they passed the Bond Act. And then it's taken that long for the state to get together, and they've collected all kinds of interest on that $4 billion, but I don't think we'll see that. In addition, we are coming to the end of the American Rescue Plan purchasing. We have a little bit throughout the rest of this year, but that has to be expended by September 31st. We may be looking at that for some of our expenses with technology, as well as potentially within the budget. We also have continued expectations for our Canvas learning management system. As you know, the district must be ready at any time to enter into remote instruction. I know that's a bad word, but it is a word that we have to be very much familiar with. Recently, New York City, just with the last snowstorm, went into it. They got a failing grade because they have not done anything. We have been training, and I want to thank the curriculum office as well as all of our teachers, as well as the technology department, to have our teachers, hopefully over the course of 3 years, get fully immersed in this and build it as we go. Yes, we'll be caught off guard if we had to do something right now, but for the most part, they're getting time to make sure they learn the system, understand the system, integrate it with school tool, and be able to carry over their work to each of the learning systems. Parents can sign up and see their own learning modules, and there's even a little button that says remote learning, so when all of a sudden we shift into remote learning, you would just go in there and click on that button and everything would be in front of you as well as the links. Did I get that right, Tiffany?
Yes.
And so we haven't tested it yet. Next year we may try to test it. We just don't know yet. We don't want to alarm people. But that's a wonderful system that we are obligated to make sure the state knows what we're doing. So what's next? We're looking at developing student help desk, especially with the technology. Student help desks also provide an opportunity for students to be the leaders among their peers, and that is a wonderful opportunity that I've had the fortune to be able to develop in other districts, and I think it's right for the high school. And a lot of times the student help desk opens to the community and they just call in, schedule a time after school, and we can help individuals, parents, and so forth. But that's a work in progress that we're going to have to strive for. As well as our technology department is looking at continued software review. Some of our software is just outdated, but we still have it. Maybe 1 or 2 individuals may still use it, but it may not be widespread, and that's what the technology department is trying to do, is look at what are we doing, what is the value for the input or the return on investment, and is it curricular or is it a convenience? And we need to make sure that we're focusing on curricular so that every student is getting that across the platforms, not just maybe one student or one class here or there. So that will cause a little agita because, you know, if you're used to using something and all of a sudden it's not available. But they are trying to take steps to make sure people understand when there's a timeline and what we have to supplement whatever they were using that may be going away. In addition, educational opportunities in the extracurricular and athletics, because let's face it, kids love to participate, and we know that better here, that our participation numbers are huge, especially in the areas of athletics, but I also believe in extracurricular as well. When you look at it, our intramurals with a student voice in all buildings, that was a goal of the board last year, as we tried to increase participation across our athletic programs, but for those students that may not have been able to gain a seat on that, we wanted other opportunities for them, and that is in place at all the buildings and all levels. Our student athlete character workshops are in place, showing the nature of our students, that it's about the person, not just the athletic piece. In addition, field band home show, you heard me talk, full season of competitions. We are fully actively engaged in competing in the state championships at the end of October, but not only that, you'll also notice up there we now have a full Winter Guard expanded season, as well as not up there a drumline, but we've taken a year off from that as we have a new person in music that needed a little time because he's been doing so much for the field band that he asked for a year, and we certainly understand. We've got to focus on our instruction, and when you're a new teacher, that's also important too, and if you draw yourself too thin, that's not good for students or the individual staff members. In addition, we have the Student Athletic Advisory Committee that works regularly with our administration. We have the Athletic Extracurricular Code of Conduct Review, which was completed by the A&E Committee and is used by every student. Once they enter into 7th grade, they're under it, and we make sure that we inform them that it's not that you have to sign it, but you have to know that we have an expectation if you're going to be in our extracurricular programs and our athletic programs. We have the athletic placement process review going on, which I've already talked about, so I won't spend time there. But one of the biggest things that happened today is the Youth Activation Council or Committee, and that's our Unified Sports Program. When I came here in 2015, we were just starting across the state in Section 2, the Unified Sports Program. When we brought it here, I think that was with Mr. Conklin and myself, we started to reach out and really try to bring that into the region, and it took off with 4 teams and it's grown. That was one program almost 9 years ago. We now have a full season of soccer, followed by bowling, followed by basketball. And our kids are participating, and we have been growing the program. And we want to thank our students for the inclusivity that they've always provided in their leadership. And I can't ask for anything better than that, like I talked to the students today. This is about all having the possibility of being all within a school, within an athletic program, and within an extracurricular program. We've expanded modified sports with roughly almost 22 coaches and expansions to try to minimize, not eliminate, reductions or cuts. Where possible, we've tried to increase opportunities at the modified level where the philosophy is about gaining experience. It is not about winning and losing, but it's about making sure that we try to enhance the lives of our students in middle school. In addition, this year, girls flag football started off 2 years ago. Last year it was named into an emerging sport. This year there's so many girls that a lot of the schools across the region are starting a JV program, and we are starting the JV flag football program so that we're as same and similar in all of our sports programs at the high school for all people to have an opportunity. We have a program-specific conditioning program, and that's a platform program for sports-specific programming for kids that we're very proud of, and the students are starting to gear up. If I'm primarily a baseball player, I'm going to start working out with skills, weight, and conditioning to address that sports-specific skill, and so forth. So that's being put into place, and it's going on sometimes during the day in our lunches, and it's going on after school, and it's also part of Mr. Detay's requirement of all coaches to make sure the students are conditioning throughout their season. And then the athletic eligibility implementation and academic study hall. We've had academic study hall, but our academic eligibility is something that we've really tried to instill, that if you're going to be actively participating, we want to make sure you're actively being educated too. And if you're having challenges, we don't turn our backs on you. We try to have the opportunity to enforce, reinforce, and assist each student in moving forward to education. That is not just for athletics. That is for athletics and major extracurricular events like field band, winter road, green room players. It's not for every extracurricular because sometimes they only meet once a month, but those that are regularly ongoing with major events and competitions, we felt, and the A&E applies it equally to all. And I want to thank them because, you know what, we've had students move up and we've had students move down, but I know the A&E committee is trying to make sure that every student has the opportunity to move forward. In addition, District Points of Pride, 2022, most recent data available, 94% of our students graduated. 2022, 63% of our students earned a Regents Diploma with advanced designation. 63% of the graduating class, advanced designation. It's the top ranking in GSD BOCES. This is one of our strongest parts of our faculty and staff getting the students there, as well as our student body and the hard work of their parents and the students together to make sure education is the #1 factor. Athletically, we are a school of distinction. For 1 year, last year, 100% of our varsity sports teams achieved Scholar Athlete team status, and I think currently we are on track to have a second year. Spring sports is getting ready to start, so the pressure's all on them because I know fall and winter, they're at 100%. Jason, you okay with that?
Oh, we got it.
Okay, that's right. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, our arts program, New York State School Music Association honors for middle school and high school band and choral students. We are regularly out there performing, and you can see some of the pictures of our students. We have an outstanding department that really tries to bring people into the district by hosting some events, but we also go out with our students to perform, not only at NISPA, but also at state band level of competitions as well. Other district points of pride, this year we've really fully implemented the Raptor system, visitor security and building safety and tracking. We have a full county SRO program as we shifted from the village. This does have some increased costs, but it's costs that are well worth it. And we have to make sure that we try to look at how we go forward and make sure we maintain it, everything that we can if possible. Very proud of our transportation department. This year's busing request process with our community was very effective. It helped improve routing efficiencies. We had a wonderful start to our transportation system over the past 2 years where we've had some challenges. Our Transversa bus system integration with tracking of routes and ensuring students checked into buses. In addition, we have the ability to put the app out right now, but because They're going to redo the app at the start of April. We didn't want to put it out to the parents like we said at the end of December and January and then have them get rid of it and then reload something. So I believe, Rich, it's April, they're planning on doing that, and then we're going to do our final trial run so that it'll be fully integrated. And students will be checking into the bus when they get on in the morning, when they get off, when they get on in the afternoon, when they get off, and parents can literally go on their app and know if their child's on the bus or not, and as well as the GPS location of those buses. That's a lot of pressure, but our drivers are up to it, our transportation department is up to it. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, we expanded New York Farm to Menu Days here in our food service program. We're very proud that with some help from the federal government, we have been able to offer student meals, both breakfast and afternoon, for all of our students here in Horseheads. We didn't qualify at the high school, we qualified by the new metrics at all the other grade levels, but with the change come, I think it was November 1st, now we do, and students are making full use of it. And I know my family, sometimes 2 or 3 lunches. They don't get 2 or 3, they get 1. But it does help them because no matter what, it's access for all, and all means all. We have a Make a Difference Day that's finally returned after some of our hiatus, and that was fun. We have to update that as we go forward, but this is the first time back, and I think it was very well received by the community. And I know even before the pandemic, we had an event that was growing and growing and growing. And then, ladies and gentlemen, one of our big points of pride is at the beginning of the year we implemented a new district mascot, and that has been being rolled out with different colors, shades, and designs, all hopefully handled through the athletic office, and just they review with me, but we try to keep it very simple. And that's for any department, extracurricular, schools, and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest points of pride that we've been doing over the past 5-6 years is Horseheads 2030. The initiatives of the Board of Education to upgrade and modernize the school district to be comparable to the other competitive school districts in the area. We had Horseheads 2030, which was Referendum 1, Building Our Future Now, which is substantially complete and we're closing out. And we're currently really into Referendum 2, continuing our build, which is an ongoing construction, and that was the middle school parking lot, which everybody loves, at least right now. I haven't heard many complaints about it. As well as finishing the outside district stadium, and we are currently under construction at Gardner Road and Ridge Road. But when you look at Building Our Future Now, you can see a lot of the hard work, the stadium, the classroom dynamic, the cafeteria, the new library at the high school, the middle school technology rooms, middle school science rooms, middle school art rooms, the cafeteria at the intermediate and middle school, the new entryway that gives permanent consideration that this is the front of our building, even though it's on the back. Everybody knows where that front of the building is now. And we've given identity to the high school, which was the goal of Building Our Future Now. But as that's substantially complete, we're moving on to continuing our build, and these are a couple of the completed projects. You can see the fully enclosed athletic district stadium that takes care of now music, district facility storage, team rooms, track, and event scheduling for either our graduation and maybe in the future even potential concerts and so forth as a revenue maker for the district. But that will take a little more cajoling and making sure that we can figure out how to do it, because we're not concertpreneurs. But at the bottom, you can see the lower right is the sort of 20,000 foot view of the middle school parking lot. And I think it was taken right after they washed it down. But that is the middle school parking lot. It's well lit, and now it's no longer going out dark. But to the left, you can also see the exit out of that parking lot from inside the parking lot and from the drive-through, that we have a third way of getting through, which is a merge lane, which a lot of people have been using. I think that has been very much a positive for the middle school, both in the intermediate school. Ron and Mike, that has really worked out well for you, hasn't it?
That is much better.
And now also busing gets dismissed on one side, parents on the other, and we don't have a lot of intermix. So in continuing our build, we also have Gardner Road. Gardner Road is in a much stronger position than what you're seeing up here, but that's a lot of the framing of the back wing, as well as you can see all the wiring in the cafeteria as they're moving forward, trying to get that ready by the end of the school year, and the enclosing of that back wing. With Gardner Road, that heavy green is what they're currently working on. After they get that finished, then they are also working on the purple area, which is the cafeteria. Patrick and his staff, along with the students, have been handling that with alternative settings for lunch, and we thank Wes Kirk for his flexibility during gym, especially because we have a makeshift cafeteria in half of the gym, and that is one of the things that I believe the cafeteria will be done at the end of this year, which will make up a lot, but then Wes, they have to update the gymnasium. So he will hopefully be doing a lot of things outside, and we have a weather that's very cooperative. But I'm sure Patrick and his staff and Wes will make sure that everything's as workable as possible and safe. You have the timeline there of construction. Right now, this construction is on time and on budget. It is on the budget that the board reestablished for the project because of inflationary pressures, which you're going to hear that word a lot tonight. Inflationary pressures have come and they have stayed, and we are looking at 13 to 18% to 21% inflation that has never been accounted for by the district. So in this project, that has been accounted for and has been addressed, so that these projects are ready to go forward and move on. And again, the tentative sort of end date of renovations is August 25, but they're really moving quick that we think they'll have a little more time to wrap things up in the second part of the year. And theirs is a 2-year phase. In addition, we have a major project going on at Big Flats. And here, a couple different things, but you can see in the lower right-hand corner, the gymnasium steel that's up, the classrooms are up. In the upper right-hand corner, that's sort of, they've already started the outside. Gardner Road is way past this. They've already got their brick up, and it's warm in there now. But they are not totally bricked in, but they are catching fast, and this project is also now currently on time and on the budget that's been approved. So that's some of the construction phase. I know the board has been out to tour, but there's been a lot that has changed since the board went out in November. Here is the green area, which they're primarily working on right now, as well as the light brown in the upper right-hand corner. By this summer, that should be almost transitioning over, where they're starting to move into the light blue area. Once they make the cafeteria turn, then they will move over to the other cafeteria, and they will be flexing their library media science area. Their timeline there is, they say April 25. We've set April 25, even though Gardner Road's August 25. We've always made the mention that we want to try to be done around April. It gives us a lot of flex time to try to clean up from construction of this magnitude. Again, a 2-year project. In addition, continuing our build has the high school. The high school is currently, at this point, in a phase of its second estimate, and the estimate we just had last year, and as you can see, well, you can't see it because the laser pointing your sword goes out with light. Everything in green, light brown, blue, that has been estimated as the major change for the south wing of the high school. The construction timeline right there is roughly, you see DD estimate complete in February. That's where we're at and where we're sort of just getting to, so that people understand that we are on timeline with that. And that is scheduled to really start right around March of 2025. So as long as state ed doesn't throw any hiccups in, that is right now on budget. We confirmed on budget at DD. This is the first one that's been totally on budget where we didn't have to try to manipulate to get on budget before we went out to bid. And I want to thank everybody, you know, Mike Coughlin, my administrative staff, all the focus groups. As we've made some trimming to it, we've made different design. But as you can see, I always say this, I want to say it, because I'm not supposed to say the Corning Gym because that was my rule. But I'm very proud of what they came up with as a design, because if you go over, nothing against Corning, they built theirs their way. Their whole gym is offset to one end of the gymnasium with the upper track. If you look at that gym, you can see bleachers on both sides of the gym, but you can also see bleachers on each end of the gym. And they are, you don't have to move them, you don't have to hurt your floor. You also have gym partitions in there that you can close it down. We can close it down into 4 gyms. But our design is that whole place is set up for centralized viewing from all parts, as well as that's your indoor graduation area if you're not outdoors. Right now, currently, that gym is set up for, I think, 22 to 2,500 seats. That's without the second floor running track area that can be done, and I believe that's without using additional floor seats. So we should have enough that at that point, once it's built, and the completion of that is roughly around August 26th. So August 26th, roughly the graduating class of 27 and beyond will have an outdoor or an indoor option. And that will be the first time that that facility could be used. In addition, at the same time, like we're doing Gardner Road and Big Flats, we also have Ridge Road. This is an important piece because Gardner Road and Big Flats are constructed over 2 years. The hard part is we could not really do that as easily over 2 years at Ridge Road because if you notice, you have the 2 long wings, but all the construction has to be in the middle of the building. You literally have to take down a lot of the mechanical systems. So they've done this so that once it's bid, and you can see the timeline, we're about a month behind the high school, and DD's coming up, and I'm hoping they'll show me a good number there so I don't have to try to rework it even more. But at this point, we're hoping that that comes in on the bid structure that we thought for the estimate, but this construction will be set so that it takes 1 full year. All the area in green and orange can actually be worked on starting in March of 2025. So we got more than a year. But that's how you try to pull this off because you really couldn't have necessarily students in the building taking this down the way that it has to be done for constructability. We will be using the building, however, most likely in the wings. That's where the district office that is located in the south gym of the high school will be relocated because we will have some access to heat and opportunities where we can use it for adults as the whole high school will be down at the same time, and instead of renting space, we can go out to this for 1 year. This is the year 2025 to 2026 when we do redistricting boundary, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But this is the year that the students, we go to 3 elementaries, and the students that would be boundary to Ridge Road will be at Ridge Road, will be at Center Street or Ridge Road at Center Street for 1 full year, and at the end of that year, they would transition back. Some of the positives is the staff won't really have to go through a lot of construction. They already have climate control in the building that they're going to, but when they come back, the rooms will almost be done. We'll have to do cleanup. That's not the same for those individuals that are in Big Flats and Gardner Road. They have to do a lot of swapping and moving, right, Patrick? And I want to thank them. Everybody's been great through the years of construction. They actually go out and hand print their walls, start decorating. So, right? We didn't know they were going to do that. We just loved white. And then Mike said, go ahead. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Ridge Road. And then things that are on the horizon. And if I can, I just want to get my... Yeah. On the horizon is the elementary redistricting timeline. We've already mentioned that. But the census is closing at the end of the month at March. We are already using some of that information and looking at it. We want to thank the community for filling it out, and we'll do a lot of pushes have been coming from the building principals in the newsletter. The demographic analysis will start roughly around March to June, and that's where they take the information from the census as well as the other relevant data that we've asked them to gather that they would do for any type of enrollment analysis, and they will work on that through June. We'll start to develop the new boundary lines based on that demographic analysis for the 3 elementary schools somewhere around the beginning of June or over the summer, with the hopes of having those boundary lines developed so that the new bus routing can start on September 2024. And then right now, currently, staffing realignment would be really beginning January 2025, and that's because of contract relationships, retirement, and so forth. But I can tell you, everybody's trying to work the best that we may be moving that up once we know a lot of the demographics, the elementary school numbers, and the collaborative relationship that we've had with our collective bargaining leaders. And everybody's trying to work in the best interest of all to give people the most amount of notice as possible. So we want to thank everybody across all of those areas. In addition, on the horizon, the elementary redistricting timeline is shipped to 3 elementary schools, September 2025 Big Flats will open with most of the construction complete, maybe closeout. Farming Road will be the same. Ridge Road will begin construction at that point, and the Ridge Road students assigned will be at Center Street for 1 year. Ridge Road will reopen in September 2026. Center Street building will then transition to adult use while we are getting state aid for the next 10 to 15 years on the work that we did prior to it shifting, which is a smart financial move that the board authorized. So thank you. That'll be district office, facility maintenance center down the road, as well as the senior and community center as we develop that. We will have to do some development of the facility maintenance center because in the third project, their center would come down for parking for the high school, but also we would have to transform some of those areas. The unique part about this is if there is ever a population expansion, we always talk about natural gas, that if you had to, it can be sort of a buffer building for a little bit if the district ever had to possibly expand. I don't think that's going to be coming to a reality anytime soon because of the politics behind it and the moratorium that's still in place, but at any time that could be overturned. We just don't know. If it's overturned and put in place, none of the districts around here will be able to handle the amount of students that transfer in within the first 1 to 5 years. But each school will try to make do. In addition, on the horizon, you all know I talked about this. I was in Albany at the request of Phil Palmisano and Tom O'Mara, the electric bus zero emission unfunded mandate. It's mandated by the state in 2022, New York State budget and legislation. Notice it's 2024 and still, this is the first year they're actually starting to talk about it. Now everybody's starting to see the real price. It is a political issue between Democrats and Republicans in Albany. The Republicans say, study it, find out if it's feasible. But I will tell you, politics aside, just a simple statement, is it feasible? And that's what we were focusing on Monday. If the state does not have to convert their fleet until 2045, and the state has an out clause in their law that says if it's feasible, why are school districts and the local tax base being told you must do this, and no matter what, by 2027 to 2035? There's not a superintendent, I don't believe there's a board of education that's against trying to make sure our world's a better place. The environment's safe, the environment is being considered. I think it's all about reasonableness and setting priorities instead of all or nothing. Right now, officially by the law, we must move to all zero emission buses by 2035, and we will only be able to purchase zero emission buses starting in 2027. I can tell you, I even said, I did our exit polls last year, the community is not in favor of voting for these high costs. We are probably going to do another exit poll this year, which really explains the cost. That if we bought 10 buses, it might be $2.1 million, but if we bought 10 EV buses, just for the buses, it's $4.5 million. I believe the answer will be, are you kidding me? Now, we have 88 buses. In addition, we have to buy a $150,000 battery because we have to keep the buses and pay for them for 12 years, even though after 10 years, we will have to take them off the road, which doesn't make sense. So there are valid points, and I'm hoping that both sides of the aisle will sit there and say, let's do a feasibility study instead of forcing us. Right now, we're scheduled, I think, $40,000 to $50,000 on a feasibility study. My recommendation, honestly, probably to the board is we're going to hold off. I hate to say it, what's the state going to do? Say you can't transport students on the buses that you have? We need to really know, because there's also a major safety issue with lithium-ion batteries under a bus if they have a problem with students on them. And I think the board knows, if you ever see a video of what happens with a lithium-ion battery, it is near seconds for you to evacuate that bus. Imagine a special ed bus, just like over here, with a wheelchair already strapped in. And you have 4 or 5 kids because you have to strap them in wheelchairs. How do we look at parents, and I said this in my interview, and ensure their kids are safe? We need logical, common sense options, and maybe percentages of how you use your fleet that will help the state move over, even in the timeline, but then expand the timeline to meet with the state. We really hope the state would be the leaders on this, and really get out in front, because it's much easier to deal with a fleet vehicle, a fleet car, or a fleet truck than it is a 20-ton bus. So that's going to be my leadership on it. I've tried to advocate. We do have some information we will be putting out to ask our community, as well as the fellow communities and GSD BOCES, to really contact individuals that are pushing this, the Public Service Commission, which is not elected, and say, please give this a better look. Because no matter what, honestly, if it's $1 million per bus for construction, charging, power station, and we have to do $88 million, all of that has to come from our local tax base first, and then we get reimbursed. I don't know many communities that can do that funding. And there is talk that the state would say, well, we're just going to do it and you don't have to have it approved by the local voters, and we're concerned about that too. So that's what's on the horizon. That's a negative. Future construction needs, as the board already indicated, we're looking at Horseheads 2030, completing our build. This would complete the 3-phase plan. Currently, it might have to go into a 4-phase plan, but the bulk of the build would be complete at the end of this, of updating and renovating the entire district. This would most likely complete the resizing of all of our classrooms to state recommended levels, implementation of climate control to update academic spaces and technology spaces for all students across the district, modernize exterior spaces for athletics, extracurricular, and community activities, and most importantly, match our facilities with the other districts in the area, and bring financial resources back here that we normally allow others to take from Horseheads. Potential voter consideration for this third project could be targeted for the fall of 2024 or the spring fall of 2025, pending district analysis and advice from our architect as well as our construction manager. Ladies and gentlemen, the hard part about all of this is the fiscal stress monitoring system of the New York State Office of Comptroller. I don't think they know what they're doing, but they said last year we had no designation for each of the years, but our stress was going up. I think we went up from 10 to 20 to last year we went back down to 0. And this is the calendar year of 23. Well, in 2024, I'm going to say they haven't been paying attention, because every district is going to be facing stress because of just one major factor: inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you remember, some of the board members may remember, but you are going to understand after tonight what the gap elimination adjustment really did. This was when the state went through a major downturn and the Great Recession. The state, to balance its budget, took the money from the schools under the gap elimination adjustment. Over the 5 years, the red bars are exactly how much money we did not receive from the state that we should have received. And if you notice, over 5 years, $21.5 million of lost revenue. And during the time they said, oh, we're going to return it. They're politicians. They never returned anything. And if you notice that bottom number, that money equates right now on the minimum to roughly lost $4.3 million a year in state revenue, not local, state revenue that they should be providing for schools. And that should have had a compounding effect since 2015. So that's probably about, maybe if you compounded over 15 to 24, another, if you do by the rate of inflation, another 20 to 30%. So that could be anywhere from another $1.2 to $1.5 million. So, districts across the state, but especially here, are facing challenges. We had pre-pandemic. Our health insurance, we knew, was getting close. But our health insurance during the pandemic actually sort of leveled off and went down. Why? Because people couldn't avail themselves of health care. They were told, stay home, only go if you need to. All emergency, all elective surgery was cut off. Almost for 2 to 3 years. Not because they said don't come after that second year or something, but it was more that people needed to feel comfortable again. If you needed a hip surgery, why would you go to a hospital where you could possibly get very, very sick? And that was the feeling tone that's there. It doesn't mean that that was going to happen. But during that time, what was fortunate enough about our health insurance is that vendor contracts were already settled. And they were settled because they usually, like an employment labor contract, a period of time. And they had these costs settled for the insurers to the vendors or the hospitals, the well-nows, and so forth. Well, that time has passed. We're past the pandemic. Can anyone imagine what happened to the bottom lines for all those hospitals and the amount that they had to do? And yes, they were probably reimbursed by the federal government with the American Rescue Plan, ESSA, that's after, but there was funding that was there. The problem is those costs are still there, and now the contracts are up. You all know WellNow sent out something that said, hey, tell Blue Cross, they need to fund us more, otherwise we can't take you. Oh, we'll take you, but we'll charge you the full amount. That's the issue that's going on right now that is affecting healthcare this year. We have $15 million in healthcare. Our healthcare is projected to be almost $19 million by the end of the year because people are getting treated. Whether they're retirees, whether they're active, whether they're kids. Healthcare is back on the table because guess what? It was a hiatus for a long time. Nobody can anticipate that, but now bring the other perfect storm. All the people getting taken care of now are getting taken care of during that high inflation, and you know a business has to adjust for that, and they're adjusting. Now we have to deal with the health insurance because we're self-funded. So that's a challenge that we're going to face this year and into the years coming in the future. In addition, inflation, contractual services. All of our supplies have been going up. Remember the rate of inflation, 6%, 9%, 4%, 5%. Yesterday it came out 3.1. It's on its way up again when it was supposed to be 2.9. Now, we don't know what the crystal ball holds, but we know that's impacting utilities, labor, food, etc. But I want you to remember one thing, because you see that labor, sometimes when you have financial challenges coming, people will say, oh, well, labor shouldn't get raises, labor shouldn't do that. I will tell you, our labor force, our contracts are in line with everything else that's been going on in this region. We've had concessions and are grateful for those by our leaderships in each to try to do what's best for Horseheads. But no matter what, we can't keep up with inflation and the demands that have been happening really in the past 2 years, but it's just like a recession. New York feels the recession almost 1.5 years to 2 years after it starts. Same exact thing's going on with inflation. That's the last one, past and ongoing inflation. We know what the past is, we don't know what the ongoing is. And remember, the governor said, and I'm referring to Governor Cuomo, our levies are high enough. We are setting a limit. 2% is all you can, but you should raise it 2% of a calculation. Well, that 2% is tied to the rate of consumer price index or inflation of 2% or lower. In other words, if inflation is 9%, we just lost 7% ability. And no matter what, the costs are still going up 7%. So that's something that we have to be very cognizant over the past 3 years that is really hitting this year. Just so that you know, challenges, local revenue versus inflation. The bottom line is our 2% tax levy limit. Those are actually the numbers we have gone out with at the bottom each year. The black line is the U.S. high inflation marks for each of those years. You can see the orange. What do you think the orange is? All the lost revenue to try to keep up with the purchasing power that businesses and homes have to adjust to. Whether homes have to go out and get an extra job, whether businesses have to raise prices. School districts, especially school districts, and they're the only ones, have to have it approved by the voters and have to stay at this level or beyond or get 60%. And there really isn't a lot of desire to go above the 2% calculation, whatever it is. So that gap, based on the inflation, and this is just an approximate number, it doesn't have compounding effects, shows that local revenue did not keep up with inflation over every one of those years to the tune right now of 21.3%. That equals in our local tax levy about $9.3 million that would normally be in the budget if you at least targeted inflation, which is what we all have to pay. It's not just on the local side, it's also on the state side. State foundation aid, again, the black line is the high inflation. The state foundation aid, the bottom line, is what they provided for our foundation aid over the years. And if you notice, you can still see the same thing. They did not keep up with inflation, which they said we should be doing. Some of those numbers aren't even close to 2%. But that orange, notice, is a loss of state revenue. In other words, what they should really be looking at to keep their public schools open, of a revenue of inflation of about 11.3% cumulative. And notice at the end, because I want to be fair, notice at the end, this year, they increased inflation because they addressed the foundation aid by 10% for us, which helped us in this budget, at a $9.1 million gap. That helped us. And it's the first time that inflation was lower than what they gave. But here's the catch. If we extended this chart into this year, that 10.2 from the state is going to drop to 2.1, and they promised us 4.8. So we're getting a cut in our aid, okay? And inflation goes from 10, or what is that, 6.4, I think? It's a little hard to see for me. But 6.4, and it's going down to 3.1, but if they're at 2.1 and they're at 3.4, we just had another gap. And that all impacts the bottom line. So when you look at this, 2.9 million from state, and if we kept up with inflation on our local side, 9.3, that's about $11.7 million that really should be supporting our schools to make it so that we're keeping up with the responsibilities and finances. So remember that gap elimination adjustment? That almost $13 million, add another 4.6 to it. That's really the funding level that the schools should be at to keep everything that we have and everything that we've built. Because it's good for kids, it's good for education. Our tax on true, just so that you know, going back from 2012-13, this is our tax on true, and what this means is for a $100,000 house, in 100% evaluation in our districts, in 2012, a person for that $100,000 house would pay $1,826 in tax. Currently today, for that same exact $100,000 house, not taking into consideration assessments or the values going up, but just a $100,000 home, the taxpayer in Horseheads pays $1,638. Notice, that's what they've been doing, the district's been doing over all this time. You can see Corning, you can see Elmira Heights, you can see Elmira. The questions are, we reached out to them, you can understand that another district may not want to be as straightforward, so we'll dig these up over the next couple of presentations so that we get the most accurate. But this isn't about tax rates comparing districts to districts, although people have, and we've shown this slide every year. This is really about capital construction, because you need to understand capital construction and what happens to tax rates over time. Notice Corning, and I'm using Corning because, let's face it, we know they went through all their major capital construction. They started that about 2000, I think 9, 10, 11, right? We don't have before that, but notice their tax rate went up, and that's because of construction. We started ours in 2017. Ours went down because our district value went up. But that doesn't mean that ours won't go up, because we still, remember, the voters approved $2.98, I think it's $2.98 or $2.88 for the rate to go up for construction. So we have to remember that we've been going down. It's sort of a hidden number that is built in as we've been going. So we wanted to show you that Elmira Heights has gone through building. They went up, and over time they start coming down again from building. Elmira, again, they've been building regularly. They've been building a lot since I've been here, and notice they've gone up, and I imagine they're going to start coming down. That's going to be the same thing for Horseheads, no matter what, because the voters have already approved that, and that must be in the budget. Our tax levy to tax rate, this is just an example, just so you can see over the same period what's happened to our tax rate from 1826 over that roughly 10-year period. We've dropped it to 1638. You can't keep doing what we're doing and keep lowering a tax rate unless the value of the district keeps skyrocketing. There's one place that's happening in Watkins Glen. And it's because they're building a lot of houses, vacation homes, and so forth. And it's just an anomaly. If you have a lot of building going on, it may not be business. But we are facing challenges with tax certs. Arnett Mall, you approved that last time. They want their portion to go down, but that portion doesn't go away. It gets spread to everybody else. So these are some challenges that we're going to face as well. But as you notice, we have a very good tradition of trying to have a levy, but our rates tend to go down lower than what the levy is, and sometimes substantially depending on growth. We find that out in August, but we estimate it, and I want to thank Katie because she's always been very close in her conservative estimates. Usually on the higher side, and it comes in lower. Like last year, I think she estimated 58 cents it was going to go up on the tax rate. Once we got to August, it only went up 34. So that was better than what we projected. And Katie in her office and all the ladies over there, as well as the tax assessors, work to try to make sure we get the best prediction as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where we're at, and the challenges are there. This district is an outstanding district, and it has a lot of great things going on. And because of inflation and because of the pressures that are out there, we are going to have to look at our budget very seriously when you see these numbers. It is nothing but inflation, healthcare, and that is what we're going to have to address and right size our budget. So at this time, I turn the podium over to Katie, and I'll come up at the end and sheet you guys to go through. And notice I was still shorter than Tony, right?
Well, I'm going to be shorter than both of you.
I know.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Douglas shared a host of historical information, so I'll walk you through what it means for us this year. We did receive the governor's first blush at a budget. School aid increased by $825 million. That's all inclusive of aid, 2.4%. It was anticipated that school aid was supposed to increase by $1.2 billion, so there's quite a bit of a gap there.
By law.
So the driver of that was the foundation aid formula. So total foundation aid out of that amount increased $507 million. Governor Hochul last year was very proud and that she finally made the foundation aid formula run as intended. She ran the calculation as it was intended, which was good. We got up to speed, everyone got where they needed to be. This year, however, now she's making some adjustments to that formula. So what was done, there is an inflationary figure within the foundation aid calculation. It is based on an inflation factor over the prior year. Instead of using that figure, she took a 10-year average inflation figure, dropped the highest and the lowest years out of that average, and came up with a different figure. So instead of using 4.1% in that formula, she used 2.4. This caused an overall decrease in anticipated foundation aid of $250 million. Another driver of this decrease, for decades, there has been a hold harmless provision within the foundation aid laws that held districts harmless from any decrease in foundation aid. If the formula ran that reflected a decrease, they would be held to the level that they were currently at, so districts didn't lose any revenue. She did away with that this year by removing that provision, which means basically half the districts in New York State are going to see a decrease in their foundation aid. We fortunately are not one of them. We are seeing an increase, just not as much as we had anticipated before this formula change. Also included in the budget is a back to basics reading plan. There's $10 million allocated to the NYSET Trust for training for the science of reading. Tony had mentioned that. We're already doing that. We'll see how that affects us since we've been implementing this all along. Let's see, there was a proposed expansion of school-based health centers. She had proposed that any school who wants to open a health clinic will be able to open a health clinic. Funding will be provided to do so. To date, no expert that has analyzed this budget can find where that money is within the budget or how it's going to be used. So we have zero clarity on how this works, but we'll keep an eye on it. Good news with Governor Hochul, unlike the prior governor who often proposed changes to the expense-based aid formulas, she's leaving them alone. They're going to continue to run as intended. So with the change in foundation aid, we can expect an increase at this time of $1.2 million. It's an increase of 4.7%. This is about $400,000 or so less than what we were anticipating when the November database came out before she changed the formula. Dr. Douglas can speak to it. There's a ton of advocacy happening right now to undo this change that she made. We're hopeful we'll have the information in time to finalize and close the budget, but at this point we're going to run with what was proposed in her aid run. Transportation aid is one of those expense-driven aids. This is something that we do calculate in-house. We do a projection of how we anticipate the current year expenditures to end, run through the complex transportation aid formula, and come up with an estimate of what we would expect. So based on expenditures, we expect for this year to be aided next year is a $478,000 increase, or 11%. Building aid, that's the aid we get on any capital project that we've done, whether we borrow for it or we've paid cash. We're entitled to building aid on these projects over the course of 15 years. Let's see, so included in this building aid, we did realize an offset of building aid. Building aid lasts for 15 years on any project. We did have some old projects age out, so we did have a decrease of $588,000 out of this building aid figure. But included in this number new this year is anticipated aid for referendum 2. This amount is still currently under review with the construction team and fiscal advisor, so we'll update that figure as we have it. But it's part of the timing of the aid and the early aid starts, or early aid approvals through state ed, that we're looking to get that aid coming in as quickly as we can. BOCES aid, another one of those expense-driven aids calculated in-house based on what we're planning to spend with BOCES this year. We'll continue to keep an eye on that. BOCES expenditures can change over the course through different resolutions to increase or decrease services, so we'll update accordingly. Other aid items, that includes our excess cost aid, which is aid we get on services provided to special education students, and our instructional materials aid, which is textbook, software, hardware, and library materials. The driver of this decrease is primarily the excess cost aid. That aid has gone down based on the calculation of that aid. All told, our state aid, as we know it today, is $47 million. This is up 3.4%, or 7.79%. I want to revisit this slide from last year. Last year, the board and I and Dr. Douglas, we had a discussion on whether or not to convert our referendum 1 borrowings to a long-term note. We weighed the pros and cons of remaining another short-term note or going to the long-term note. At the time, we opted to do another one-year note, and then we would convert next year. So we're here next year, and I just want to remind everybody what the process is, what it means to go through DASNY. So it's a very advantageous arrangement for schools such as us with the monies we have to invest and borrow. DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of New York State, that's a state public financing and construction authority that's been in the business doing this for 75 plus years. We would be part of a school pool that we would join together to collectively borrow one large borrow together. There's currently 50 schools that have thrown their hat into this pool right now. The pool typically it's likely going to be over $1 billion once we pull all the schools together. The benefit of going with a long-term note is that it locks in our interest rate, so it protects us from any future fluctuations in interest rate. Very similar to if you got a fixed rate mortgage on your house. You're locked in, you know what your rate's going to be. The other benefit of going through DASNY as opposed to a traditional market bond is the way the building aid is calculated. There's legislation between DASNY and state ed that allows a different building aid calculation that's based on a blended rate of our prior short-term notes. So we all know our interest rates have been higher, so those are all blended together to come up with the interest rate that's calculated into our building aid. So we'll get more building aid going through DASNY than we would going through a traditional bond. These bonds are callable later, so if we find later in time that the market has shifted and rates are down, we do have the ability to refinance our bond independently, separate from the pool if we chose. We would get the benefit of the lower interest rate at that time while still maintaining the benefit of that higher aid calculation. So at this time, I'm working with fiscal advisors to make this transition to the DASNY bond. The current principal balance that we would be putting into this pool is $75 million. And I'm working with fiscal advisors on that process and finalizing what that debt schedule would look like. Any questions on DASNY?
You don't know the interest rate yet. That's a calculation
It's a calculation to be done.
based off of all of our interest rates that we're paying now just within our district
Yes,
from the different people that we've borrowed the money
from our prior prior short-term notes, yes.
Okay.
Could you refresh my memory? I mean, we had this discussion last year.
Yep.
Why did we choose not to do it last year? I mean, at some point, we determined it was more advantageous to go the route we went.
Yep, so I think the primary driver was that, was being mindful of its impact on the tax cap, because it was a larger jump to make that shift to the principal and interest versus to stay with the note. So we opted to do it for one more year, kind of level things out a little bit more and transition this year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so the tax cap calculation, Dr. Douglas gave a pretty decent overview of this earlier. Started in 2011, meant to place limits on entities such as us on what we can levy in taxes. So the allowable rate this year of inflation is 2%. Dr. Douglas went over what the actual inflation rate factors are. We're capped at 2% as determined by the state comptroller. The tax base growth factor is down to 1.0034. This is a rate determined by the Department of Tax and Finance, which is a measure they put on the change of property values within our district. In order to exceed the calculation, we would need 60% of voter approval to go above the calculation. So looking at the 24-25 column, we always start with what the current year levy is. So we levied $43,727,000 last year. We apply that growth factor. We add back in the pilots that we anticipated from last year. And we take back out that capital exclusion piece to create a new adjusted prior year levy of $53.5 million. The 2% comes in there. Adjusted levy $44 million. We subtract back out what we're expecting to receive in pilots for 24-25. That number has gone down. We've had some pilots mature that are now no longer pilots. They're going to go back on the assessment roll. So that number has gone down. I do have a few new pilots that are coming on the books that I need to work with the Director of Real Property at Chemung County to determine some estimates on those. So that number may change if those projects are running on time and the pilot agreement will start on time. So there are a couple exclusions to the tax levy that we are allowed to, beyond that base calculation we just looked at, that we can levy tax on. The main component of that is that capital exclusion piece. So we are allowed to levy taxes according to this calculation based on our capital expenses. So it takes our capital expenses, so our debt service on our building, our debt service on our buses, any monies that we're transferring to the capital fund for other projects, and our share of the BOCES capital expense, that totals our expense side. That is offset by aid that we're anticipating on those expenditures. So building aid that we talked about, a specific transportation aid calculation, and the aid on our share of those BOCES capital expenditures. Those are netted out. Any number that's a positive, we can levy a tax on. If the one side goes the other way, it's just a zero and there's no impact on the calculation. So for this year, the capital exclusion is $6.1 million. This is part of the debt and the borrowing plan that we talked with our community when we did the vote. We were authorized to borrow the 122 million and authorized to borrow the 94 million. So we're working in according to the plan and the timeline of the project that's been set forth. With referendum 2, fiscally responsible, we used that $10 million in the capital reserve first. That delayed any interest expense we may have accrued. That money has been expended. We've done our first borrowing, so the payment will be due in June of 25. The number may change a little bit, so part of the process of knowing what we're going to borrow for an upcoming fiscal years, I work with Welliver. They provide a cash flow schedule of the actual construction work anticipated for that fiscal year, come up with an estimate of what we think we're going to need for cash on hand to do that work. The goal is to not overborrow. If we overborrow, we're incurring excess interest expense in 1 year, so we stay to try as true as we can without cutting ourselves too short. So Welliver has just provided me an updated cash flow schedule, so we'll review that and make any adjustments to this as necessary. So we haven't had this piece in our calculation before. There's that ERS exclusion amount. So we are allowed to levy a tax on any percentage over 2% on the rate of ERS or TRS. ERS rate has gone up by 2.1% this year, so we can levy a tax on that 0.1%. This is based on the projected wage base in the ERS system, so that 1% equates to a potential levy increase of that $10,000. So when all that shakes out, our maximum allowable levy limit is $50,356,660. This is an increase of $6.6 million or 15.16%. So again, this is the amount allowable by formula with that 2% tax cap. This 15% requires simple majority. And again, this is all in accordance with our capital project plans, what we presented to the voters, and the plan we had set forth for our debt. Item of note, sorry, I'm going to backtrack a minute. As part of that spending plan for the capital project, we had discussed that we would reduce that transfer to capital that we've been carrying in our budget, that $1 million transfer to capital for smaller cash projects over the years. That has been eliminated, so that is no longer in the tax cap. It's a way to bring that debt service down because that's part of that capital exclusion piece. So that was reduced by $1 million. As part of the plan, we told the community that has not been removed from the budget. In addition, we had an old bond payoff this year. So in the current budget now, we had $1 million for an old bond budgeted for. That's paid off this year, so that can be removed from the budget. So that's $2 million I was able to take out of that capital exclusion piece. Summary of budgeted revenues, tax items. That decrease you see of that $422,000, that's based on the decrease in the pilots. At this point in time, we don't show any levy increase. This is a discussion we'll have later with the board once we decide some other decisions on where we want to go with the tax levy. So at this point, we hold the levy flat and show us the other adjustments. State aid, we talked about the increase of the $3.4 million. Other revenue is a variety of things, but the main drivers of that decrease is the removal of stop loss insurance returns. We used to see stop loss refunds for our health insurance plan on a fairly regular basis. It was something we used to be able to rely on for offsetting our health claims. We have not been seeing that in the last couple of years, so it's prudent to remove that as a revenue source at this time. Our BOCES refund we've seen go down, so that's been reduced by $200,000. On the offset of that, we've had some increases where Anna's working very hard on a cash flow plan, analyzing all of our monies in, all of our monies out, and finding those opportunities where we have some excess cash on hand and investing that money into T-bills. So we're doing 2-month notes, 6-month notes. Anytime we have some cash that we can pull out of our cash flow schedule to invest, we're doing that to generate interest. So I was able to increase our interest earning lines by another $75,000. There might be opportunities to increase that more. And we're also seeing an increase in our Medicaid reimbursements. starting point for our revenue is $93,499,000. And just a reminder for everyone, our starting point always removes fund balance, always removes reserves, and the tax levy. Those are all discussions that we'll have over the course of the process. Dr. Douglas, the board will all decide on what that plan looks like over time. Summary of budgeted expenditures. This breaks it down by the large categories within our budget. Salary items, obviously anything that is a payroll related item. So we have our contractual salaries, substitutes, overtime, extra hours, health buyout, stipends, curriculum work, things of that nature. Current increase is $2.8 million or 6.87%. Benefits is also a large portion of our budget. This includes things like the ERS, TRS, and FICA Med contributions from the district, workers' compensation insurance, vision and dental, and this is where our health claims live. So as Dr. Douglas spoke about earlier, we are seeing that large increase in our claims, not only affecting what we're projecting for next year, also impacting this year. So to keep pace with what we're seeing in health claims, the budget has been adjusted up for claims from $16 million to $20 million.
I just want to make sure, based on what we talked about in finance, I'm understanding the vocabulary. We're not seeing an increase in claims in the sense, last year 100 people went to the hospital, and this year 150 people went to the hospital. We're seeing that the 100 people that went to the hospital this year were charged $100. Now those same 100 people that went to the hospital are being charged $150 or $175 for the same service, correct? I mean, we're not seeing abuse in the system. That way, when you say that there's an increase in claims, I think it could lead people to possibly conclude, well, more people are going to the hospital now, so stop them from going to get health care. I just want to make sure that it's clear it's the cost of the people going has dramatically increased.
Yes. Primarily, it is the cost of the health care and what's being treated. I will say, we would look out and ask that specific question of Blue Cross, because we got to be careful with that. We do know that there's probably some increased number of claims that in the past may not have gone, just because, like I said, they stayed away for a little bit and it's taken a while, and now they've got to address their issue. But that is no fault of anybody else's. That's just individuals trying to do what's best for them in their healthcare situation.
Okay, that's all. I just want to make sure
Yes, I would agree.
the vocabulary is
Yes.
clear what we're saying.
No insinuation of abuse.
Yeah.
People are using the system in their benefits in the way it's intended. Absolutely, and it's within their right to do so. We do just have to keep pace with it so we can continue to provide this benefit.
Thank you.
Yep. So the debt service, we talked about this during the tax cap. It's up 6.6% or 79%. Again, I just want to say that this was planned and known and part of our spending plan for the capital projects. BOCES services, we do utilize quite a bit through BOCES. A large chunk of it is our special ed services that we provide our students. CTE, our share of the administrative costs, things of that nature, but there's a lot of things that we purchase services for that support our students. Those services are currently under review, and we'll modify that number as we hone in on what services we look to purchase for 24-25. Equipment supplies contractual up $1.4 million. There's a couple things driving this. One, I'll start with the smaller one. Dr. Douglas mentioned the SRO contract. We did have to increase that budget line by $100,000. They have a more robust level of service that benefits our district, but it does come with that increased cost. The primary driver of this, though, is the addition of $1 million for potential tax refunds. Dr. Douglas mentioned the Arnett Mall. They recently settled in court to challenge their assessments for the 2019 and 2020 tax years. We just had to issue a pretty sizable refund for those 2 years. It was a court order that we had to comply with. There are 3 years still outstanding to be settled, and we don't know where that's going to land yet. I'm keeping a close eye on it, keeping close contact with our legal counsel to see what the two parties' plan is for these 3 out years. We don't really have any say in the process. The discussions between the municipality and the property owner, we're just kind of along for the ride to see where things shake out. But we do need to plan on a plan for any potential refunds between the recent art settlement, what we've seen with the Raymore and Flanagan settlement that the board recently saw. Our reserve is low, and we will not be able to use our reserve to fund what this potential Arnett settlement could be. So we need to have a plan on how to cover that. So that's in the general fund now. As more information comes to light as far as any negotiations for a settlement or if this is going to trial, that will help inform what we do with this $1 million. Leave it, reduce it, half it, we'll have to see.
The hard part about that is, as people may be seeing when we talk about tax certs, it doesn't mean the tax is going away from Arnett. In other words, if their tax bill goes down by, say, $500,000, the $500,000 gets spread out to every other taxpayer in the area. Arnett is just saying, as a mall, not the hospital, is we don't believe we should have this much of a share, and therefore that share goes to everybody else. It doesn't go away, but because they may challenge again or somebody else does, we must have the financial liquidity to be able to take care of that. And because the reserve is low because of the 2 recent ones, we must ask the taxpayers to fund that, because basically somebody has a right to come in and say, we want ours lowered, and the budget has to absorb that. So that's what's going on in what case.
The transfer to capital, that reflects the $1 million decrease that I talked about during the tax cap. Part of our long-term plan, stop transferring that $1 million to capital, save that money to help offset our debt. The remaining funds are monies that we transfer to the school lunch fund for their share of the BOCES aid, and a transfer to the federal fund for the district portion of a couple special education programs. So this is our rollover budget. This contains everything that the district currently does. It includes all contractual obligations. So with all that put together at this point, our budget is $108 million, or 15.89% over last year.
And ladies and gentlemen, just so that you know, that's keeping everything we have as of today for next year. These are preliminary numbers, but if you look at that, total expenditures is up 15.89. Remember those numbers we talked about inflation? 6, 9.1, and then I think 4.6. That's 15, that's 20%. Over the course of the 3 years, that has been growing, plus 3.1, you're at 23%. And our budget to handle the inflation and handle our issues is 15.89 versus what is out there needed to handle inflation. So we are trying to manage it, but there is going to be decisions to be made in the future.
So this is typically where we start each year. We take the components as we know them today. And based on what we just talked about, we are starting with a budget gap of just over $15 million. As always, we have the tools that we talk about every year. We have to have more discussions on the tax levy and where the board is comfortable going out at. We're hoping for that additional state aid, not only from the correction of the foundation aid formula, but the updated calculation of the building aid. Use of fund balance and reserves, those will come at the end of the process. And budget reductions, obviously we have some work to do. And it's going to be challenging. But we are already working on what this means. We're looking at things at this point, we're looking at things big picture, but we're gonna start honing in on those things to start with that are least impactful. least impactful to students, least impactful to staff, least impactful to program. So we're going to do an analysis of our BOCES services. $15 million, we'll see what we can take out of that. Retirements haven't been calculated yet. We always have breakage from our retirements, so that will decrease salaries as well as have a decrease on the ERS, TRS, and the FICA Med portion and the benefits. We're going to review our technology purchases to see if we can change our replacement cycle or defer some purchases to later, and any sort of manipulation we can do there. Another thing we can look at is a reevaluation of all of our grant funds, our title funds, our special ed funds. How are they being utilized now? How can we shift their purpose, something different that would support the general fund a little bit more? We still have remaining ARP monies that we can look at. We have some currently earmarked for technology, so we're going to look at how we can use that money to support both this year and next year to alleviate some pressure on the general fund. And we do have the Smart Schools Bond Act project that we're looking at. We're going to buy smart boards and laptops with that. There's $242,000 left there. So by buying laptops through that project, that will help our analysis of that replacement cycle with technology. One item not yet in the budget is the increase in employee health contributions. We typically see an increase in that every year. Part of that calculation of our premium equivalent rates, that's what our consultant calculates, that determines the 20% or whatever the contractual percentage is that employees will pay towards health insurance. Those are based on actual claims themselves. So as those claims grow and increase, the premium equivalents will also grow and increase. So Caitlin and I are working with our healthcare consultants now to determine and finalize those rates. And once we know those rates, they can be applied in the budget, and we'll bring that deficit down some.
I'm fine.
So we can come back to this later if the board so chooses, but I'm going to turn it over to the Transportation Department for an overview of their budget.
As Rich comes up, just so that you know, again, to emphasize what Katie said, these are preliminary numbers. This is the first blush. We have a lot more work to do. That's why, as our district, we tried to take the next 2 months to really try to refine and get in and see what actually is going to happen and our outcomes. Now we start going through departments and start looking at what the department needs are, and also building there. At the next time, you'll see a little update, whether the gap goes up or goes down. Our hope is to try to bring it down a little as we refine some of the numbers. But just so that the board knows, I personally met with all the leaderships of all of our collective bargaining agreements. We will be going out on our road tours like we always do to the towns and villages if they want us to, and the agencies to start communicating some of this information out. As well, if somebody knows somebody, have them reach out to my office. We'll be happy to talk to them. But it's still very early on, and we have to wait for the state as well. So, Rich?
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Transportation Department. We haven't done this since, I think, prior to COVID. And ladies and gentlemen, bear with me because I only have 4 slides. Okay? Thank you. So our first one is the transportation overview. If you look at our salaries line, I have another slide for that, but basically all you're looking at in salaries are the contractual increases that we see. There's no additional staff projections added on for the upcoming year. Our equipment line, again, we've kept that relatively flat. We don't anticipate more parts or equipment on buses. But at the same time, it's hard to try to generate less of those. Tires, when they're worn out, need tires. So that's where we kept that line flat. Fuel is now based flat on what we did last year. And I just need to explain that DCMO, which is the BOCES that we usually get our contractual agreement on fuel, have not gone out for bid yet. So we went flat. The general feeling from DCMO BOCES is that there should be some reduction in the diesel and gas rates, but we don't know that right now. I'm hesitant to say that. I don't want to make a promise we can't keep, but right now we could definitely feel confident to keep that flat from what we had budgeted from this present year. Fuel reimbursement, again, is the same. That's from all the municipalities, Elmira High School District and so on, that reimburse us for fuel, that use our fuel island. Parts and supply, again, relatively flat. We think we can maintain everything that we did this year. We can try and maintain that for next year. Other operating costs, the only item on this, for the most part, is that we anticipated in the budget anyway, I know there's policy decisions that need to be made, approximately $45,000 for the engineering study needed for electric buses. Our hope is that we can get through some type of grant funding to replace that and take it out of the budget for an incoming revenue source through a grant. But until we can get that, we decided to place it in here. It could be pulled at a later on. I also am aware there are policy decisions that you guys will also need to make for direction of transportation, but we thought it was safe to put it in here, and then down the road you tell me otherwise. So for our total, we're basically, the other little item also just to mention on the operating cost was that there was a $9,000 increase in insurance. So if you go to the next line, that is our salary and our positions. I won't really go down this line by line with you. Basically, we're keeping our staffing level the same. We're not asking anymore. In years past, you were kind enough to give us some floating monitors. It has had a great impact on student discipline on our bus and monitoring student safety. Everything else is relatively the same. All you're really looking at is the contractual increases from our bargaining units, and the one item is that out of the 5 years, we're in the last year and the lowest year of the bus driver unit regarding their increases. Bus replacement, we have an ongoing, as we've told you before, as Jason monitors for us, a standard bus replacement program. We try to revolve around a 10-year bus cycle for our yellow buses and a 5-year for our SUVs. So what we are anticipating right now is 7 school buses and 2 SUVs to round out our 5-year process. So apparently 5 years down the road, before my time, we bought 2 SUVs on the same year instead of spreading it out. So that 5-year rotation is now up this year. We're proposing for going out to the voters $1.6 million. That's the same amount that we did last year. And if you look at the overall history of our bus purchases, we have tried to be relatively consistent as far as our dollar figures and roughly with our vehicles. So if you can see in the 2019-2020 year, that was the year that we had the 2 SUVs added on. So we're going to see a slight jump of 9 if you were to look at a 24-25 chart that had that in place. Again, we are forging ahead as if we're continuing with our diesel and gas buses, we're continuing with our yellow buses, and that same rotation. As Dr. Douglas had said, until we hear otherwise from the state on the electric buses, we are trying to go ahead and continue our normal process, and then that's a whole other discussion for another night. So that being said, that is our 4 slides for transportation. That's an all-time record for me, ladies and gentlemen. Is there any questions I could answer?
Thank you, Rich.
Just on the first slide, I missed it. What was the percentage increase this year?
I believe it was 7.54.
Thank you.
That's
I know it's in the circle, I just.
7.85. Sorry, let's begin.
And that's actually, leave that slide up for a
Yep.
second. Just because you see flat numbers does not mean inflation is not going to hit the transportation department. It means they've held the line and they feel they can get through next year. But if they bought 200 tires, they aren't buying 200 tires with that money. They're buying less because inflation is hitting them just as hard. You just may not see it here. They're trying to hold the line, and we're looking at that, but that's the numbers they feel they'll get through next year, but there's inflationary costs even in that. that just are not shown, correct?
Yes, and I don't go into detail with that. Let's just take one example. A diesel bus uses a lot more oil than a gas bus. So we're having more gas buses put into the fleet. So even though you would think we would be using less oil, oil is more expensive now than in the past. So as Dr. Douglas is saying, that's the way we try to manage it. We, in some cases, use less when we can, because that has to offset the cost that everything is costing much more. And that's just a typical example of oil in our buses. Yeah. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, future budget meetings, we combine them with our board meeting, so this one's a little longer. The next one will be Thursday, February 29th, leap year. Yay, we got an extra day. At that, you'll see this budget being over and over. The slides don't really change much, just some of the information. But that's courtesy, and I know Sue's back there. Sue, stand up. Reason being is this is the second to last presentation she's going to be doing on the budget, and I think she's probably happy. But thank you for all the work that you've done to make our points as clear and relevant as possible. Then you have all the other dates, March 14th, technology, we're pretty much at the Multimedia Center at this point until we get through the budgeting process and then return to our building rotations. So those are the dates. Next slide. And questions that you have for Katie and I? Mr. Johnson.
The $108 million total budget, that's inclusive of a $108 million budget. That's inclusive of us going out of the 2% tax levy limit. No.
That's just the budget side. So the $93 million you saw on the revenue side is what we're comparing against. That does not include the levy increase.
Okay.
So the gap right now that you're seeing, that 15.3 million, does not incorporate any sort of levy increase at this time.
Right. That's just the true gap without any other tools applied at this point.
Okay. And what was it 6.6 million on that we could raise?
Yes.
The 2% number is 6.6 million that requires only a simple majority vote. And the board has regularly gone out at whatever the 2% number has been.
Thank you.
Again, this is just a work in progress. We want to thank the board for listening. We'll have more in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. So we're working hard on it. Thank you all.
All right, so before we go to the finance items for action, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm instituting a new rule.
I have one more item as well under mine.
But when we come back, My mic doesn't want to turn on and off here apparently, so I'll use my teacher voice. I think Dr. Douglas has one other item to present under the superintendent report, so we'll go with that one other item.
This item was brought up at the last board meeting, shared with the board. It's regarding an appeal, and there needs to be consideration of the appeal by Amy Sunshine. The letter that she wrote in regards to the Board of Education's initial decision, not from this year, but from roughly around April last year when the daycare switched from a nonprofit to a for-profit in which she provides a wonderful service. She has asked for the board to consider allowing the district to transport from all buildings to her center. At this point, currently, she has 3 enrolled from Center Street, 7 enrolled from Gardner Road, 6 enrolled from Ridge Road, 4 from Big Flats, and 4 from the intermediate school for 24 kids. However, she also states that there's a lot of children remaining that could be bused, almost 1,500. As we've looked into it, both from the business side, both from the transportation side, as well, the administration's recommendation is that the board deny this appeal. One is because it is for profit, and the board has already weighed in on that. But not only that, we wish we could help out, but if we help out Amy Sunshine, we have to help out every other single daycare in the district. And I'm sure in transportation, we've already talked, that would bode very unwise for our transportation department, as well as making all the routes across the district. Not only that, is it's not just for profit. Once we start going across districts and start providing that busing, we could have a slew of requests from any grandparent, any parent, any babysitter across the district. Not only that, within a certain amount of mileage, legal is still researching, we may be obligated to transport to any request to outside the district daycare centers, because if we do for one, we do for all. In light of the budget situation, in light of the transportation requirements and stuff, district administration recommends the board deny this.
So I need a recommendation to support the superintendent's recommendation with respect to the Amy's Sunshine Daycare. Does anybody want to make that recommendation to support the superintendent's decision here? I don't think I can from the chair, right? So it has to be.
I can make it. What am I supposed to
I'd let Doug. Nothing against you, Mary Ann, but
No,
I
I
know he's
just-
already thinking about it.
Well, you can say it more legally than I would.
So the resolution would be, the board hereby, it's kind of weird the way you were saying it. So
Don't make it, right?
essentially, do we deny the appeal? I think is the cleanest way. I make a motion that we deny the appeal of Amy Sunshine Daycare.
So moved. Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments?
I have a, oh, go ahead, some people go.
I'll go Liz, then Katrina.
I need to abstain as this directly affects my children.
Katrina, you got a comment?
I have a question. My question is because thinking about childcare and how difficult it is for families to find childcare, is there a way that the people who go to that daycare could be allowed to go to the school district that they are zoned to be bused to? So if it was a stop within their school district, could we say, if your child is enrolled in this daycare, then you as a parent have the option to say, if you want busing for your child goes to, say, Gardner Road. If that's, I'm guessing Gardner Road is Amy's zoned area, I don't know, it's Gardner Road or Center Street. Okay, Center Street. So for the people, the kids that go to that, since they would be losing their busing and then potentially, you know, it's the hardship to try to find childcare. Is it allowable to say, okay, kids that are in the Big Flats kids, the Gardner Road kids, your option is if you want to stay at Amy's daycare, you have to be enrolled at Center Street, your kids get dropped off to and from this location, and Center Street is your new school. Is that something that's allowable?
Unfortunately, under Board of Education policy, no. District students must go and attend the school of their attendance zone boundary by board policy.
So then it would be something that we could review the policy if we wanted to, in order to help parents in our district potentially, because I do think that this is, my parents are in daycare and I listened in during the pandemic on a lot of their talks, and we lost like 100 daycares in Chemung County. And childcare and finding places for people to go is a real hardship, and that letter that we read, it talked about closing down and how many families it would affect. So I'm just trying to think of ways that could possibly help. If there were ways that we could help, I would like to know all of those options instead of just.
Well, I think those options aren't valid at this point. You did mention that your parents are in daycare, and I think they're for-profit or non-profit, I just don't know.
For-profit.
Okay, so if they're for-profit, that means they could apply for this, which means now we have two, I'm just using that as an example because you said it. But if another daycare from another center that is, say, in Big Flats or beyond Big Flats or Country, what's the one next to us, Country Town? Country Bridge, they could ask for kids from Ridge Road. So the problem there is it becomes a major financial, major transportation issue. But the policies are there for a reason, because we have to keep balance. Parents don't have the ability to select which schools they're going just by selecting the daycare. The hard part is anybody that has a vested interest in that daycare is going to be compromised by this. That's the hard part. I think Liz is mentioning it. Even though she doesn't receive anything, there's a potential implication. So please be aware of that. In regards to Amy's, we understand. That's why last year when they closed down, we were very helpful, along with, I believe, the county executive. I think Kevin Adams was very helpful as well at that time, of trying to make sure that we tried to help the parents with daycare. But that's a parent's choice. Unfortunately, the school can't address that. The difficulty is even at that time, the board informed all the parents that were going there that for this year, and for that year and transition year, because it was so late, we would do that. So every parent that goes there knows that this is the reality at the end of this year. The question is, before the board, is do we overturn that and allow these individual parents, because I can't as a district sort of advocate for more kids to go to Amy's daycare, just like I can't for another daycare. I know other daycares, some of them do get permission from the parents to go pick the kids up. And that is something I think Mr. Gill has expressed to Amy's Sunshine Center as well. I don't know if they're willing to, but some of this issue has to fall upon them, not necessarily the district. And that's where our recommendation comes from. Is that fair enough, Tony? Okay. Rich? So hopefully I've answered as much as I can. I just don't know what the board can do, because we have to do what we need to do educationally. And we do certainly sympathize with the parents, but we aren't authorized to run daycare. Mr. Christmas.
I just wanted to clarify what you were proposing. You'd still have the school transporting the students to the daycare.
If they're in the boundaries.
Do we do that?
Yes, we must do that. So, like right now, currently, if next year, Amy's daycare is identified, currently what we do is say Amy's daycare is in the Center Street boundary. Those 3 kids from Center Street, if they put in the request, because it's on the bus route, we will drop off. No different than we drop off at a grandparent's house and so forth. It's just that those students that are from Gardner Road, or those students that are from Big Flats, the parents will be responsible for that transportation. Or Amy's daycare will be responsible to connect with the parents and how they're doing.
So it's the cross.
It's just the cross boundary.
That helps me. Okay. I just want to clarify. So. Yeah.
And we do that for every individual, for-profit or not-for-profit daycare that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, my view is it's an unfortunate situation. I'm certainly sympathetic, but I think given our budget constraints that we have and the inability to do this broadly, I just don't think we can do it. And it doesn't mean that the daycare itself is not available. It's just a question of the students have to be able to get there a different way, which there are probably many other ways that are possible.
Yeah, if I can add, that's one of the concerns that was in the letter, is that this also, I don't know if she'll be viable as a daycare if this goes into place, which it is, and she knew that going into it. But unfortunately, we can't take one business position over another as a school district and get the public funds.
Any other comments?
So then, but my question about, do we know if there would be a big cost? Or if there would be a significant cost if they did that, say, not just for Amy's, and I guess I wouldn't know off the top of my head for what the other daycares are, but if it was a state licensed daycare, and I don't know if the law would permit it to just say, those people going to that daycare, we allow it as the board, as a transportation policy shift, if we are allowed to make that decision to say, we're going to allow all of the kids that go from the Big Flats or the Gardner to attend Center Street as an option, if there's space, if there's whatever, I don't know all the things, but if that's something that we're allowed to consider, if we wanted to consider it.
If the board wants to change their policy, they can consider it. However, you're gonna have a direct impact on that number. And no matter what, a direct impact on his number, as well as routes, timings, and everything, as well as, the board could say, hey, we're gonna transport to this daycare and this daycare, but the board does not get to say, we're not gonna transport to all the other requests. So once you open it up to one, the unknown is all the other ones, and that's Pandora's box.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we allow the transportation. I'm just saying that we say, okay, Amy's daycare, if you go to Amy's daycare, you're a Center Street's kid. Even if you live in Big Flats, you get, your parents drop you off at daycare and then they go. Does that make sense?
So I have a question in regards to that. So let's just say, I'll pick a number, 20 students go to Center Street now, and Center Street's at a max. What 20 students do you ship somewhere else because we're accommodating the Amy's daycare 20 students?
Well,
There's a domino effect there, and who do we tell to leave?
right, I agree with that. I was just saying that if we could look at it more, figure out, like, are there numbers, are there space? State regulations do set maximums on how many people can be in that daycare, and we already do zone our buses to transport however many people that are in that zone to that given elementary school. So I'm just simply asking if it's something, I don't know what, I just wanted to be able to explain my viewpoint to.
I'll go to Mr. Gill and then Mary Ann.
Just real quick, the ripple that hasn't been talked about is if we're gonna allow those students, which is an idea to work within, change of policy, to now go to Center Street, now the district's responsible for getting those kids to Center Street regardless where they are, because currently you have to be able to transport your own kid to that other location. So if a Big Flats, a person can no longer attend Big Flats because of enrollment, it might occur that way, or in your situation, it's the district's responsibility to get them to that other location. So as soon as you open that up to say, yes, 3 Big Flats kids, you can come to Center Street, regardless of the ripple of kicking out, now we're responsible to getting those Big Flat kids to Center Street. We have to transport
that
them.
only.
So we're adding that run from morning to drop off for our buses to go out to Big Flats to transport those 3 kids to Center Street to take advantage of Amy's Sunshine and the possibility of ripple effect of kicking home boundary kids out of their position or making that decision.
So my question would be, you can't write it in your policy to say your drop-off point is Amy Sunshine, pick up, drop off only. If you want your child to get daycare services from this is the bus, otherwise, like, pick up and drop off from Center Street, your kid is allowed to go to Center Street, if not, that's my
Yeah, it
question.
becomes an equity issue on that, as far as this kid's opportunity to attend this. The school take advantage of something else, and someone else is able to get their kid.
I mean, I love your compassion to try to help. I think everybody would love to. The problem is financial reality, equity for all, and then all the unknowns that could be coming in, which is going to challenge the district even more. And then, I hate to say it, just like when the board changed the boundary policy to no more out-of-boundary policy, you start having people school shopping, and I'll go here. And now we're making potential businesses sort of like Amy's Daycares, your families, others, being able to advertise, hey, if you come to me, the school district will have to do that. That would be potentially can be challenged by anyone in the district that you're giving gift of public funds to individuals. And if a board, I have to caution you, you have to be very careful because it's your direct family that you brought up, that if that's ever put into place, people could have a potential issue here. So you may have to think about on your weighing in on this decision.
Mary Ann?
Okay. I may be interpreting this wrong, but, you know, being a teacher, it seems like we're putting daycare ahead of academics. And I think children should be going to the schools in their neighborhood. It's just a personal philosophy, and I'm not expecting everybody to agree with it. But I can't imagine that parents would choose a daycare because that's where their kids could be picked up and dropped off to go to whatever school. It just, it doesn't set well to me. And I think it's far more important that children go to school with their neighborhood children. It's a community kind of thing. When I lived in Horseheads, I opted and taught in Corning. It would have been very easy and very financially a profit for me, no pun intended, to take my children to Corning with me and have them go to school there. I wanted them to go to school with the children that lived in our neighborhood. And at that time, and even now, I felt Horseheads had the better school district. I mean, I just can't imagine choosing a daycare over your child's school. It makes no sense to me. Sorry.
All right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. So now we move to section 6, financial items for action. We need a vote on 6.02 to 6.15. Can I have a motion, please?
Second?
Curiosities, discussion, comments? Mr. Johnson?
As a BOCES employee, I'll need to abstain, or choose to abstain on items 6.05 and 6.09 as they involve BOCES funding to avoid the appearance of impropriety.
It'd be like grade school. I've never seen you in glasses. Should I make some grade school comment?
Did you get those from me? Okay, I missed it.
All right.
I had some questions that I had written down. On 6, I don't know, I think I got that wrong. There was one of the, on the change order log, I was trying to go down, and if you scroll on it, it was kind of hard to read. So my question is, the contract, there's a 6-digit code that's assigned by the state for each of the projects that are within the system. So the state records, is that correct? The 006-017 or that GC, I believe that says GC contract summary contact total. That's the state number, correct? The assigned number?
Yes, that's the state SCD project.
Okay, and are these items on the change log something that have already been done construction-wise, or that we want to do in the future construction-wise?
They're already approved.
They've already been approved.
So the process is, this is reviewed by the Facilities and Grounds Committee. So the one that's highlighted is the new one that's being reviewed tonight. Everything else has already been reviewed and approved.
But by the board, not just the committee.
Correct, yeah, top of facilities.
The committee does not
Right,
approve it.
Right, I meant by the board.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
approval comes from myself under authorization of the board, as well as from Mike Cochran under the authorization of the board, to not hold up and increase costs of the capital project. And we bring this to the matter of the facility committee and then on to the board for final approval. And if it goes above our limits, then we bring that to the board before it's approved.
And just to note, the one that's highlighted, the lighting pole, that's actually a credit, so that's money in our
Coming
favor.
to the district.
Okay, so the finance, so the facilities planning committee, when you guys go over these with them, you will say, so I guess one of the ones, oh, it doesn't matter. The bus garage asphalt, for example, increase in material cost was the $33,730.
Yep.
Okay, and so then the board approved that back in November of '22.
Well, actually, I approved it because it's under my limit of $35,000 per item.
Oh, okay.
And then we bring it to the board to make it official for state ed purposes.
Okay, because you can make any of these changes without the board approval up to 35,000, is that correct? Okay, just so I'm understanding this process. And then there was one item that it was hard for me to see, and it said admin, and I couldn't tell if it said 54,000 or 4,000, and I didn't know what the word was in front of it. It said,
This is allowance deduct.
oh, that's allowance deduct.
And that's also.
And just so that you know, allowances are not subject to a limit. They are contractual amounts provided to a contractor that, in other words, there's certain things you can't necessarily price, but if all of a sudden they find something, they have flexibility within their budget and we can authorize it as an allowance because they're already owed that amount of money. If by chance the district does not expend that allowance, it comes back to the district.
Okay, so this is a negative.
Yep.
Is it a negative and then a money sign, or is that a 5?
I think that's a $4,835, it looks like.
Okay.
They all have a dollar sign.
Okay, it's just the print on whatever is just hard to read.
Yep. Do you know why the print's hard to read, or?
No, I'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I agree with you, I'm trying to scan.
I just,
Put my
it
eyes
was hard to,
somewhere.
it was hard to read the different lines between, so that's, I believe that covers all the questions that I had written down in that section. Oh, a little further up in that, for the action items, it was talking about the BOCES,
That's outside.
like the change order, and it went from one arrow to the next order, but it said that we had approved it in the fall, I believe. I was
I'm
trying
not
to.
sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, the methodology.
Oh, the cost methodology.
Has the arrows on
Yes, so I was trying to understand that the service and the methodology for changes. So it's saying this is for the fall of 2023. So is this something that's already happened that we're approving? And then I guess I'm just trying to, the arrows that are going from the blue box, are they gonna then become the green box? Is that the idea behind this visual?
So,
Go ahead, Katie. BOCES can be a little confusing in this, so that's not a bad question at all.
So each year, component districts are required to approve the cost methodology for all the BOCES services. The charts that you're looking at are proposed changes that they're looking to make to a cost methodology. So fall of '23 is when these changes were made and proposed, so they happened in the fall, compiled for our approval now. So the green is where it is now, the blue is where they're proposing it shifts to. So upon approval of the component districts, this will be the cost methodology of those particular posters going forward. And just to note, let's see, the 605.025 and 605.032 we do not participate in, so there's no impact to us for those. 605.017, there hasn't been any actual change yet. They're just making a note that they're reviewing the methodologies based on a conversation they had with the component district superintendents.
Nice to add a clarifying.
Sure.
The way I understand it is as you look at the cover page, what's being proposed to change, assuming we agree, would then be implemented in the 2024-2025 year. So the current approved methodologies would remain for this school year. If we were to agree, it would get implemented in the following year.
Correct, and this is part of BOCES planning as they develop their budgets for next year.
Just want to make that.
Yep, thank you.
All right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
You got it? Okay. All right, section number 7, we have 2 items for consideration, the HR recommendations and then a civil service law section 75. So I need a motion. I couldn't think of the word.
Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments?
Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I apologize on bended knee.
No, that's absolutely fine. My head probably didn't even show here. As usual, in section E, instructional substitutes, I will be voting no for candidate 5 and candidate 6. And in section F, instructional contract substitutes, I will be voting no for candidate 2. And as I have always said, I do not know these individuals, but I do not want to give approval for someone to be in our school district teaching without a degree.
Okay, I will concur with Mary Ann on that. So I'll abstain on those sections. All right. All right, call the question. Call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And you have the, okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to welcome everybody we appointed tonight. In life we make new friends, so tonight we made some new friends, and we don't have to say goodbye to anybody tonight, so I guess that's good also, because there's no retirements on tonight's list. So welcome aboard to all of the new hires. All right, so we have, where am I at? Oh, board policies.
Nope, miscellaneous items for action.
Oh, miscellaneous items for action. All right, so we have 3 under section 8. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments.
Just so that the board knows, the 2 field trips are for state, but because we had the time, I've already approved them, but I'm just bringing it for the record.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I just abstained from 8.02.
Okay. All right, we have our policy section. So the first thing we have is the policy committee report.
The policy committee met on February 5th. We reviewed new items, student safety, notification of sex offenders, and workplace violence protection policy. We did not, I believe, have any discussion on student conduct on buses, and student wellness and student interrogations either, those, and student accident insurance. Searches and interrogations and student accident insurance do appear as on the agenda, but they are just for the board's information of what our current policy is and if there's any discussion of it. And I do not recall any good of the order.
All right, so now I need a motion for approval of 9.03, 4, and 5.
So moved.
Second.
Curiosities, discussion, comments. Katrina?
Yeah, I was unable to make it to the meeting, and I did have some changes that I had wanted to, the first reading, I had wanted to make some changes to the student conduct on the buses policy. And so I think this is my last opportunity to be able to make those recommendations. So if everybody's got that policy pulled up. So it says some students are eligible for district transportation. We are 100% busing district, so I think we should say that all students are eligible for transportation as long as they're following the code of conduct and the safety on the buses. And
Trina, if I can address that one
Yeah.
first, we can't say all,
why?
because pre-K, we cannot bus pre-K. So some students is the correct vernacular for this policy, is checked by legal counsel, correct?
And outside the district.
And outside the district. So although we still provide 100% busing if people want it, the policy is technically correct that some students are eligible, but unfortunately not every student is eligible.
Okay, and then the other part that I had a question about is the such responsibility shall end when the student is delivered to the regular bus stop at the close of the day of school. There's a lot of instances that kids aren't delivered to their regular bus stop, if there's like a sporting event or if they're going to a different location. So would we want our policy to say something different than regular bus stop? Because it might not always be the regular bus stop.
I think in general, it's wherever the bus stops is a regular bus stop, whether it's to a grandparent's house for coverage or whether it's to a regular bus stop or like a communal bus stop. The big thing about that line is very simply, once the child steps foot off that bus, which is school property, it is now the parent's responsibility and supervision. And the district's position of liability and coverage of that student ceases. That's why it's written that.
Okay, because I don't see, you know, if they were on a sports trip and they get off of the bus at the sports trip, I feel like it should just maybe be a little more generalized to after they leave the bus and not just the regular
Can I ask a clarifying question on sports trip? You mean if we take a bus and we go to Main Endwell and drop the kids off there?
Yeah.
They're still on school property. Main Endwell is our school property, why our students are there under a school function. So when they travel back home, they're ours when they get off school property. If it's a night trip and they're coming back and they're a varsity student and they're getting off the bus, once they get off that bus, we don't provide busing, so their parents must be there to provide that ride home, or they have that. So it's the termination of the trip or the termination of its relationship with school.
Okay.
Okay?
So those were just my thoughts. Obviously, they don't have to be implemented, but that's what I would have told the policy committee if I was able to attend the meeting. So the other part that I had where it talks about the distraction part, it says minimal distractions for the bus driver. I thought it should be changed to no distraction, hang on. I don't know exactly where that was. There was a, where was it? Okay. Student conduct shall support a high degree of safety, the comfort of fellow passengers, the respect of motorists on the highway, and the respect of private property throughout the bus route. I thought maybe we should also add in there the bus driver. They should have a high respect for the driver themselves as well in the policy. And the other, I don't remember where it was talking about distractions. But I wanted to change that to no distractions, because it said something about.
The first paragraph, Katrina?
Is that the first paragraph? Well, yes, and the fewest distractions for bus drivers. I think it should be and no distractions for bus drivers. Because what's a few? A couple, 2, 3, I don't think that students should be allowed to distract the bus driver at all. So those were my edits for that policy that I thought maybe we could take into consideration. I don't know if the board wants to take those things into consideration, but if we do, I guess we would maybe move that back into the first reading or put it back to the policy committee to possibly make those changes and then bring it back to the board. I'm not quite sure how that would work, but I wanted to be able to say those since I wasn't able to go to the meeting. Again, I apologize. And then I did have a proposition for 9.04 for the searches and interrogations. There is a section, we haven't made any edits to this policy, But there is an edit that I thought would be, the part that says, when police have properly entered the school and desire to interview students in the school, students must be afforded the same rights they have outside the school. I thought maybe we should go a little bit more into detail about those rights, and I thought that we should also add that parental consent should also, our parents should be there in being interviewed, because I believe that's the law, if they're a minor, 17 years and under. I know it's not for if an instance happens on school property, but I think that we could do a little bit more clarifying on that piece.
Mr. Johnson?
I don't think it's a good idea to add anything to that sentence, because those rights are generally constitutional in nature, and they're developed through case law, through the courts, and they could change, in a moment's instance. So I don't think it's our responsibility to list the rights that they might have outside the school, and that could change even if we were to list them out, which we probably couldn't do a complete list anyway.
What? Liz?
Circling back to the question about no distraction for buses. I'll be honest, never driven a bus. No one will let me. Not for me not asking.
We got a big middle school parking lot.
Okay. So who's gonna let me? You're gonna let me?
He's gonna train you.
So since we have you here, is it feasible to even say no distractions? Again, I don't drive, so realistically, saying no distractions, is that possible, or?
You, as also a former bus driver, you can't do that. You would want the least amount possible, but you can't outrule it. And then if a child says, hey, Mr. Rich, Joey's having a seizure,
Right.
is he disrupting me?
Right.
But he's disrupting me in a manner that then I can call for help, pull over, render first aid. So I understand the theory behind it, but it really just is not feasible.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to approve the items as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose 9.3 and 9, whoa. I oppose 9.3 and 9.03 and 9.04 because of the changes that I was trying to work through, but I do approve 9.05.
Okay. Abstentions? All right, section 10, we have first readings. Does anybody have any questions for the committee on the three policies that are listed? Seeing none. Section 11, the President's Report. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Transportation Department for having us. Appreciate being here. Sometimes I think this building is overlooked as we go to all the other schools and see what goes on, so it's nice to be here, and we appreciate you having us and hosting us. Secondly, I believe, Dr. Douglas, this was your first official room that you led a board meeting after you were appointed the superintendent of schools. So this was, you are returning to your first official location as a board meeting.
You know, I forgot about that. You're absolutely right. And I think we had to talk about Common Core, sit and stare, and other things going on in the district, and it was a hootenanny. And I think we stopped the issue on Common Core that time, so I appreciate the board, and I'm happy to returned, but it is the second time, just so that you know, because I just remembered. Because there was one other time I came here and I watched an amazing person do an individual board presentation absolutely backwards through a bus mirror. Correct?
That's right. That's right.
I had the bus mirror, held it up backwards to see what a driver sees.
With a presentation. So, and it was relatively shorter than what we've ever done.
Yeah.
But thank you, that's your memory lane.
So on Monday, January 29th, the board had a retreat and we covered different topics. And one of the areas covered was best governance practices and clarifying operating procedures for the board. So out of these discussions, a decision was made to make a temporary committee to continue the work on board norms. So right now I have 3 members that I've talked to about it, and I'm going to talk to one more. And at this point in time, what we're looking at is NISBA gave us a book. I'm sure you don't really care, but a blueprint for better school board operating procedures. So what we're doing right now, myself, Dr. Douglas, and Liz, is we're going through this book and taking recommendations that we think are good and aligning them with school board policy. And then we're going to create a document, and that's what the committee will get to review, make recommendations, enhance, delete, whatever their recommendations would be. It's anticipated that this work would start towards the end of the month, and then then it would be up to them to make their timeline for what work they need to do. So that is what we're working on right now, and that's my report.
If I can just add to that,
You
suggested
may.
time, just so that the board members know with this ad hoc, because it will involve the district administration too to provide guidance. But it will probably require some commitments on a weekly basis, because there's about 34 pages of policy review and titles to go through during that time. That's why we're trying to align it as much as possible to our actual policy, but there are some tweaks that might even have to go to policy committee to readjust the policy, because some of our policies are not necessarily even in line with absolute proper practice. So if the individuals, once you do it, at the next meeting, we'll have to have a resolution to create an ad hoc committee for the duration of roughly about a 2-month period to bring back recommendations to the board, and then any future policy decisions, we'll draft that recommendation once we know the names and for approval of the board.
Okay. All right, now we move to board member comments.
I'm just going to say it. Excuse me. I want to thank the, excuse me, you bus guys for keeping our kids safe and all you do to make their rides as enjoyable as possible, and the great safety records that we have because of all your hard work. I also want to thank Katie and her staff for helping someone who has absolutely no financial background understand what's going on. So thank you for putting it in layman's terms and all the work that you do.
So I'd like to echo that with Katie and her staff. This part of the year is never easy, and it's even especially hard this year. And so, you know, Katie is the bearer of bad news sometimes, but it comes with a lot of data and a lot of effort with Katie and the rest of the team. So thank you. I also happened to be at a luncheon today in which our athletic director received a really nice award in Section 4. So I just want to congratulate Charles on that and for supporting the students of Four Sides and what you do for athletics.
If you don't mind me asking what was awarded, because he hasn't told me yet.
I don't know the official name of it, so
Just as a K?
I don't remember the name of it.
It's called the Liam Frawley Award. It goes to a New York State athletic director. It's an emerging athletic director who's done things. Local.
Well, congratulations. I don't know if I could have gotten away today, but we would love to come up with something.
The more important award was Christine's son, Cody Dale, won the Dennis Freeze Essay Scholarship Award. It was a $1,000 scholarship for all his academic pursuit and obviously athletics. So that was a bigger award. So congratulations to Cody.
I know Dr. Douglas mentioned this. So Sue, this is your last board meeting. You still have a budget meeting, right?
Yeah,
So
she still has that.
I just want to thank you. You know, in all the years that I've been on the board, and you know, you just have done wonderful things for the district. And I love, you know, all those automated messages that come out that have your voice on them. I hope you can still keep your voice because it's always so pleasant and it makes bad news sound really good. But I just want to thank you for always being a light of the district and always being so positive. And you know, I like having you in the audience because you're always smiling and giving really positive affirmations all the time. So thank you.
All right, so I would like to say that not only myself, but Liz and Aaron attended the Moana Junior play at the middle school. So if anybody would like to see the cast of characters, it was really good play, very entertaining. Lot of good thespians down in the middle school. So next time there's a middle school play, it's a great opportunity to see wonderful young actors and actresses. And congratulations to the staff that did the directing and the music and all of the work to put on the performance. So it was very entertaining and very enjoyable.
That was what I was going to say, so you're good.
Oh, all right. All right. Were we going to have a motion to go into executive session?
Yes.
Oh, did you have a comment, Katrina?
Yeah, I had some questions about what you were talking about with, because I wasn't at the board retreat. So is the packet essentially their recommendation on policies to go over and look at?
No, it's their recommendations on how an effective board operates.
Okay, I guess I just have some questions because some of my things that I wanted to have addressed that I had asked to be put on the agenda were addressed tonight in the superintendent's report. But I guess we do have a policy that talks about getting things on the agenda. I guess I'm just looking to have clarification on
That's what this will do. That's what this will be part of that.
So I feel like that's kind of already a part of the policy committee and what the policy committee does.
We're following the direct recommendation of Ms. Buck to create this ad hoc committee and resource that will investigate deeper into our policies and make sure that they align with what we do.
So I guess at the last retreat, when we were talking about committees a little bit, and I had shared the whole piece about committees and what the state had talked about with those committees, I guess I just feel like it's more effective for the board to talk about it as a board and or have the policy committee talk about the way that our policies are.
But the board that night did not think bringing a 38-page document to this environment and opening it to questions would be an effective use of time. We felt it would be much better for a smaller group to analyze it, have the discussion, and then work through whatever problems there may be in the document, and then bring it to the board in total. Thought it would be a more efficient and effective use of time.
I just feel like that's the job of policy writing and being on policy committee.
So I think part of this though too is not necessarily just policy. Yes, we have policies, but also the practices, right? And how we operate as a board, how we interact as a board, how we conduct ourselves as a board. So it's above and beyond the policy component to it, which is what we had discussed at that retreat, and when we made the decision that we would continue to explore this, continue to come up with, this is how we're going to operate, and connect it to the different policies, and then potentially make a recommendation that says, you know, we need to be more clear in this policy, or we need to update this policy, and then work in conjunction with the policy committee to do that. So we're not looking to do any of the work of the policy committee, it's more of the above and beyond and looking at a bigger picture.
All right, I need a motion to go in. Wait, I don't want to make that motion. Do we want to go into executive session? Because there was discussion when we left the last one. No? Okay. Then I have. So then I make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I had wanted to go back into.
Well, then you have to make the motion.
Yeah, I make a motion to go back into executive session
For what purpose?
to discuss personnel issues regarding policy that we had approved, or that we were discussing tonight. I believe it was 9.04, maybe it was 9.03. Hang on.
Is that a legal reason to go into executive session?
So it's to discuss changes or potential changes to that policy, but the situation would talk specifically about students and or staff. So I believe that's why it needs to be discussed in executive session.
I'm asking now, I don't know, is that a legal reason to go into executive session?
To discuss the policy, I do not believe, but I believe what you're trying to say is you want to talk about an issue that you've known about that you want to share in relationship to said policy.
It would be under personnel, like the one that we go into like in the beginning of the meeting, personnel.
So the law is that we can go into executive session to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. I would also remind board members that we have a contractual obligation under the superintendent's contract. Under paragraph 5, board referral, it says the board individually and collectively shall promptly and discreetly refer to the superintendent in writing for his study and recommendation any and all criticisms, complaints, and suggestions, communications, or comments which it may have regarding the administration of the district. So if what you are proposing to talk about is something that you're personally aware of or been made aware of, and you have not reported it to the superintendent, that under the contract, I believe would be your first step.
Never thought of it that way, but thank you. Have to be very careful, because if the individual personnel provides a potential contractual issue for HR, we have to make sure we ensure the rights before we have any discussion. Correct?
Yes, it's hard to
So-
know in the abstract.
So what I would say is we need the specifics, time, information forwarded on to me so that we can conduct that review first before I can talk to the board. Is that how I have to proceed?
Yes.
So it's up to the board.
Well, from what I understand, we legally can't go into executive session. Is that an accurate interpretation, Mr. Johnson?
As I always remind you guys, I'm not the attorney for
I
that
know,
project. I'm not passing.
We can play one on TV.
Yes. I'm not passing judgment on Ms. Ambarski's motion. I'm just saying, I'm reminding us of what the standard is. If she feels it meets the standard, the motion can still stand. It's still wanting a second, which I have not heard yet. And once it gets a second, or if it gets a second, then we can further discuss and do a vote on it.
Additionally, if I can add, if we went in and it's not appropriate for executive session, we can immediately end and come out, right?
And do we need a majority to come out, or how do we do that?
Why, we can't allow
Okay.
officially things that aren't part of executive session.
So, first of all, I want to make sure that the wording is proper before we even discuss it, that we properly word the reason we might want to go into executive session. Because I don't want to get caught in anything that's improper.
Ms. Ambarski would have to amend or rework her resolution and get a second for us to properly consider it.
I'll just write the email then to you, or I can just have a discussion with you.
Yeah, just give me a call so I can take notes.
Right, well, I believe that it was executive session, but, you know, maybe it is, maybe it's not. There definitely wasn't this type of care going into executive session for board dynamics. I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Travel safely tonight, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Enjoy your night.